There we go. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Breakfast Club. Got that funk here, and to my that side is Rob Dev Show. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Just hanging in there, trying not to go stir crazy and all that stuff. Um,
You
it's
got a
not too
few.
hard. I'm pretty used to it. I'm used to my own company, and I like my room. I know it looks like a teenager lives in here, but it's just me. I don't have anybody to impress. Nobody sees this room but me and the people that watch my videos. You know, yeah, I don't have guests. Sadly, yeah, yeah,
That was so sad.
yeah, right. So anyway, I know when other people come here, we'll probably revisit this topic, but I mean, I can't help but jump right in with the whole injecting disinfectant thing because I think we've come to a point where every single person should demand the president to resign. I know he won't resign because he's not the resigning type. Um,
Yes, he has resigned to not resign.
right, exactly. Having said that, though, I mean, honestly, his position is completely untenable. Trump isn't just a laughing stock in America. You can't imagine what the rest of the world must be thinking right now. Um, I can't. I mean, I've, in a way, I'm glad I'm not out in London checking out the British comedy circuit this weekend because they'll eviscerate him. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Can't believe it. Uh,
So yeah, but I mean, like how he says, the thing is that really bothers me about it is when he tried to backpedal the next day, saying, "Oh, I was being sarcastic." Well, here's the thing, bro. I mean, and this is not just President Trump. This is true for any president of the United States. If you're president of the United States, you should not make light of matters of life and death. You should not joke or be sarcastic when you're talking about war, famine, disease, poverty. Those are not subjects you joke about. If you're president, at least. I mean, if you're George Carlin or fucking Chris Rock or whatever, go on. But if you're president, the position requires, you know, leadership, decorum, class.
Now
Usually lacking.
there's unverified reports of people scattered throughout the country who have they drank bleach or a disinfectant or tried to inject it.
Already?
There,
Really? I mean, I honestly thought they weren't going to be that stupid. I honestly thought that.
I don't think there's many, but I think there's some. There are some poison control. Um,
Do you think
what
these
what they are.
people are just like lawsuit hunters? They're going to do it, hopefully survive, and then sue Trump.
I don't know. I don't know if I honestly don't think people would go that far. I mean, there are people. It's no joke. There are people here that talk about Trump like he was sent by God.
I
Um,
know. I don't get it.
it's yeah, it's insane. And so
It's
it's
like
like
I said. It's like I said last week, Rob. I mean, to me, what I don't understand is that Americans seem to want to, and I'm using this word deliberately, believe in a man. I mean, believe in a philosophy, fine. Believe in a religion, fine. I get it. Believe in a person in that way, to where you just think that he has to be right or he has to be telling the truth or whatever because he's him. It's absolutely
we
shocking to me that comes from any American.
decades ago, maybe more than decades and decades ago, we uh, deified first our founding fathers, and then we deified the office of the presidency. Hey, Joe.
Hey,
And now Trump has we've seen the transference of that deification from the office to the man.
right.
And I think we saw a little bit of that with Obama, where there were
Right.
people that looked at him and they treated him as if he was like some kind of second coming. Um, but now we see it like full tilt with Trump supporters. They've deified him.
Yeah. Well, and that same thing has happened elsewhere in society too. You look at, like, if you look at religious figures and all the shit they get away with because somehow we believe, well, they couldn't possibly be doing heinous shit because they're people of God, or police officers, people in the military. You know, we just don't want to. You know, we'll make all manner of excuses for their transgressions.
That's true. That's true. We've deified the military and the police again decades ago. I think the deification of the police probably goes back to the 1950s. But yeah, that was and the military World War II.
Right.
Yeah, very much. I believe that. Yes, we very much deified those people.
Yep.
Part of why we are where we are.
Yeah, I got in an argument yesterday with somebody who they were mad because the Navy now is thinking about reinstating that the captain of the Roosevelt, because basically he never should have been, like, you know, kicked off in the first place. Turns out he didn't actually break any rules. He just embarrassed some people, and he wasn't the one that leaked it to the media. So this person was arguing against me, and then there was somebody else, on my side of the argument. And then she said, "Well, did you ever serve?" I'm like, well, "What fucking difference does that make?" And she said, "Well, I've been in the military, so therefore," I'm like, "No, that doesn't make you an expert in anything except maybe your MOS." You know, I mean, what was your specialty? That doesn't make you a strategist or tactician or know anything about OPSEC or anything like that.
I'll give you 80 to 90% agreement on that. There's a special or a different mindset, you know, in the service, and you have a better understanding of it if you serve.
Yeah.
So I'm with you about 85%.
Yeah. Well, no, and I get that the mindset's different, but again, the mindset isn't necessarily correct either. You know.
True. Well, true.
You know.
True.
And that's the thing.
There's a significant amount of brainwashing that goes on in the military. It's how it operates.
Right.
It thrives on it. It's how it survives. So.
Well, I remember watching. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Lindy Beige, his channel. He's an archaeologist, British.
I think so.
And does a lot of, you know, historical stuff. He's pretty cool. He's also an atheist. He did a video about what it takes to kill, and how even in the military, even people who are trained to go into combat and potentially kill another person, most people in the military, even in war, don't actually kill anybody, certainly not directly, because then they found that, like, you know, it's hard. It's kind of like, you know, maybe ingrained into us, you know, that, you know, because we're humans and we look at another human and, you know, we have a certain relationship there. So they said that most individuals don't act, and the British did studies on this and then what they did was, over the last 50 years, they did a lot of psychological studies, like, okay, how do we get people to actually, you know, do the deed instead of just shooting in the air or shooting in the general direction or whatever. And so, like you said, that brainwashing, that's actually been scientifically studied to work.
You have to dehumanize your opponent.
Right.
Then they're no longer people. They're not people. They're gooks. They are. Or the one
Jerry's,
I can't say. You know,
Jerry's. They used to call the Germans Jerry's back in the day.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they're not people. They're whatever that group is,
right?
According to the military.
And they have all sorts of nasty names for the Iraqis.
Right.
Oh yeah. Well, those are some of the ones that I can't say. I can't.
Right.
Say.
Yeah.
Some of the most offensive, I think, were used for Middle Easterners in general.
Right.
Sure.
Really, some of them are really offensive. But, you know, I mean, it's a necessary component to train people how to kill. And for the military, it works beautifully.
Mm.
The problem is those people go home.
Right.
Those people go home and they carry that shit in their head.
Right.
Can't help but.
Yeah, you know.
Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is one of my main reasons why I oppose war. It's not just that I oppose violence for political ends, which is obviously wrong, but it's the fact that, you know, your kid, my kid, could go over there and be put in a position where they might have to murder someone who never actually did them any harm. They went over there to their country with weapons and then got shot at. So of course they had to shoot back or whatever. And and then you have to come home and live with that shit. And even if you're lucky enough not to have to kill anyone and lucky enough not to get killed or maimed in a roadside incident, you still have seen all that shit. You've seen it all up close and personal. And I know when I was a fireman when I was a teenager, and I seen loads of grisly automobile accidents and people being pulled dead out of rivers and shit like that. I performed my first CPR on a dead body, from a guy pulled out of a river, and he was blue. He was definitely dead, but we had a shot. You know what I mean? Right. But anyway, so and those sorts of memories are pretty traumatic for me in one sense, but they're also like me becoming a man and all that kind of shit, which is where my head was at the time. But it lives with you. You see someone's guts turned inside out, you don't unsee that. You just don't unsee it.
Well, that's what kind of scared me, because I've seen with people who are veterans who have been in war, I've seen like two types. Like most are like, they really don't go into a lot of detail because it is painful and it is traumatic, and they might tell you like the broad strokes, but they don't want to get into too many details, or they have to be in the right mindset to do it. There's a very small number of the kind of really messed up ones that are kind of like, yeah, man, I knew we did this, and like those are ones people, they're a tiny fraction, but they're scary. The ones that exist, like. Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I peace and love, everybody. That's what I say.
I'm with you, Paul. I'm with you. Well, that's the thing. Whenever I go somewhere, like go to another country or go to another state, someplace I've never been, and there's just people just chilling and they're having a meal and a drink and whatever, and they're just having a good time, and I'm just like, there's no good reason why this just can't be all of life. There really isn't. We know why it doesn't happen that way, because of greed and fear mostly, and variations on that theme, but it's so sad because it's like, yeah, well, what you said, Rob, when a lot of Black Vietnam vets came back home and protested the war after they came home, and a lot of them, what they said is, hey, no Vietnamese ever called me nigger.
Right.
Why am I killing them?
Right. Well, here's the thing, we don't value, everyone talks about American values as being like great values and everything. And I don't necessarily disagree that we have a lot of great values that we do cherish. Freedom is a great value, for example. I can't argue with that.
Right.
We don't value beauty, and we don't value happiness to anywhere near the extent to which they ought to be valued. Because if you value beauty, you're not going to litter or pollute, right? You're going to have really nice architecture. Fucking everything's going to be gorgeous. Yeah.
Right.
If you value beauty, if you value happiness, you're not going to be busting your ass with a job you don't want to do. But you're not going to settle for that. We wouldn't settle for the society we've settled for. We've put greed on a pedestal. Yeah. And what's the word I'm looking for? Acquisition, property, we
are the property.
Yeah.
Together.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Yeah. Yankee traders.
Yep.
Yeah. You talk about like American values. There's like core American values, and those core values are pretty, especially in today's world. They're almost universal. It's, the U.S. In its inception kind of rewrote the book on how countries look and how governments act. And a lot of the world has come our way. Those are the core values. Then you expand that out a little bit further and you get to more everyday American values. And this is where things like you're talking about and some of our core values kind of conflict. We ought to, value beauty. We ought to value, certain things. On the other hand, we're free not to. Our core value is we're free.
Of course, yeah.
We're free, to dump our ashtray on the side of the road, or to not care. Anybody tells you you're wrong, it's a free country. I can believe whatever I want. I can feel about it however I want. So
well, that's what I'm saying. I can't disagree with that. Like I said, freedom is worthy of value. I can't diss that as a value, but I don't think I think holding that up and then holding greed up at the same time, they don't mix very well.
Right.
You know, they don't mix very well.
They mix well for the people who are who have a lot of resources, have a lot of power. Because like you said about beauty, because I can understand why people who are on the lower economic level don't necessarily. I mean, they might want to hold those as core values, and they may. But the whole thing about not littering or not doing graffiti. You don't see graffiti in a high priced neighborhood, but you might see it in a poor neighborhood. Why? Because basically the system has failed them so much they don't believe in it.
Right.
So because it basically doesn't mean anything to them, because it's like, well, it was shitty yesterday, it's shitty today, it's gonna be shitty tomorrow, no matter how hard I work at it. And the people who could change it don't give a fuck, or don't give a fuck enough, or don't have enough power to do it, or whatever. But that's why I say greed and fear are the two worst things, because the powerful use greedy, powerful people who have lots of resources use fear on the lower classes and the middle classes to get them at odds with one another, so they can continue to perpetuate their greed.
Right. While the rich take your cookies, they tell you to watch out for the poor who want your crumbs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it seems it's worked for a long time.
Well, I mean, it's worked really well since St. Ron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, agreement. Yeah, I agree with that statement. That's why we were talking about that sort of thing last week, weren't we? About freedom to swing your fist and all that. Eventually it will clash with someone else's freedom, and that's where you got to draw these lines, I suppose. Getting back to the values thing for a second, though, the problem with valuing greed is there's a flip side to greed, and the flip side to greed is waste. Yeah. And a greedy society produces more waste, and we're fast approaching. We're already past. We're past the tipping point now. You know what I mean, in terms of what's going to happen to the climate. And quite honestly, I don't really see. When you really look at all the different problems and not just the problems, but the problems with the solutions to the problems. You start to realize that the only real solution is to cut the human population by like half, because you can have right, Thanos, yeah, you can have an industrial society, but not to feed 7 billion people. You can't do it, and obviously we don't. There's half the world lives in poverty, of course, but what I'm trying to say is, when I was in my lifetime, in fact, in our lifetimes, the population of the world has doubled, right? And in our lifetimes, this is not an exaggeration, 60% of the animal population has died in our lifetime, right? That's not sustainable. Huh?
Welcome to the Anthropocene.
Right. Well, yeah. And this is not sustainable. And we depend on the wild world, and all nature depends on us to back the hell off. And so we really need to seriously reconsider our industrial society, and I don't really, if you can have population growth and capitalist growth at the same time without ruining the planet. I don't think you can. I think you have to sacrifice one or the other: population growth or capitalist growth.
Yeah. Okay. So about half the world living in poverty, and also by extension going hungry. Right? As of right now, the Earth produces enough food of all types to feed everyone on the planet easily.
Absolutely true.
The issue with poverty and hunger is not resources; it's greed. It's
Yep,
greed.
that's
Logistics. Logistically, it is very difficult and very expensive to get those resources to everyone.
But it could be done.
But it can be done, right? But it can be done. The problem becomes when mostly factory farms, because they're the ones who produce most of the food today, aren't going to get anything in return for the effort to get the food to the people who need it. They have no incentive to do so. So there's that. That's one of the biggest problems when it comes to feeding the world, because we could easily feed the world.
Yeah.
You know, there's that. Space, there's plenty of space yet for people, for a growing population. This planet can sustain many more people than it already has. And wildlife dying off, yeah, that's 100% greed. 100%. That's the only reason.
The thing about it, and even why it doesn't change is greed, even from people who wouldn't recognize this as greed. Because really, what it comes down to is we're all going to, in order for to become sustainable, and it absolutely could, we have to change the way we do things. We have to give up certain things. We have to accommodate different things. And people aren't willing to do that. People aren't willing to drive less, or and do like this. We don't need to fly around the planet. We can still get together. People aren't willing to maybe eat a little bit less meat, or maybe eat something different that they're not used to. And let's make sure that we don't consume a particular thing into oblivion, so where there's not enough of it anymore. People say, damn it, I want some salmon. I don't give a fuck if it's the last piece of salmon, if that means there's going to be no more salmon left. Which is crazy. I mean, it's insane.
Diet fads have done horrible things to the environment. Like vegans, vegans who one of their arguments for being a vegan is food waste, and destruction of land for livestock. But vegan diets are just as harmful as omnivorous diets, except that they're harmful in a different way.
Right.
And it's a way that they feel comfortable that they can justify. So I mean, it's just like, you think about how many acres of rainforest have been destroyed to grow the latest superfood. And the people that grow the food and do the harvesting and farm it live in poverty and can't even afford to eat the food that they're growing.
That's what I was going to say. Well, look at quinoa. When quinoa became the grain du jour, and everybody's like, oh, let's eat quinoa. So it's like in Peru, I think it's grown. The price got so high, but the thing is here, the producer price didn't go up, so the people growing it weren't making any extra money, but the people who distribute it were charging so much, so there was huge demand, so they got rich and fat off of it. But basically it priced the locals out of the market, so this was a staple food for the people who ate it, and now they couldn't afford to eat the food that they grew. But no one seems to care. No, everyone cares about every goat and little gnat. But what about the human being that was exploited and displaced?
And then there's chemicals involved in growing crops. There's fertilizers and pesticides, and so even stuff that like, oh, it's organic, but there's still fertilizers and pesticides. I mean, it's insecticides rather. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Right.
I mean, that's just farming. So yeah, it's
well. The other thing too,
there's no way to sustain any human population at all on the planet anywhere without causing some harm to the planet. It just isn't possible. Right. It's not.
Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, like for 100,000 years, the human being has been more or less anatomically the same, right?
Right.
And for the first 96,000 years or 94,000 years or whatever, there wasn't really any civilization, right, to speak of. And the world got along fine. We got along.
It was the only time. But it was the only time.
You need your local skills. Your local skills are what do it. This is what I'm trying to say. We've branched out to the point, and it's not a sustainable system now. The system is.
The only time that we lived in balance with our environment was those 93 or 94,000 years.
Yeah, right.
Once we discovered agriculture, then that's it.
Now, one thing to note though is that here's one thing that's important as far as the sustainability. Now, I mean, I know it can sometimes we can be very nostalgic or kind of wax poetically about before industrialization, but we grow now. It's more than 8 times the amount of food per unit land than we did before. So,
right.
So that's something that isn't possible without mechanization and some level of industrialization. So and it used to be that most people in society were working in agriculture and even then they barely made it. So, so that's part of the reason why the population's exploded, right? So basically it's gotten so easy. I think now like less than 2% of the population of the world has to work in agriculture in order to feed everybody.
Right. Well, I mean, the population has exploded all over the world, just at different speeds. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, a teenager, and China got its 1 billionth baby when I was in high school. Now I think they're like at 1.4, 1.5, something like that. And India's at 1.2 or 1.3. And I remember when I was a kid, India had like 700 million. So, Asia all by itself has a huge population thing. And obviously the rest of the world has its own thing going on. But like, the like Dev said about the food, the same is true with all the main necessary resources. We could easily distribute them more equitably around the world and have a different system. We just choose not to, and the reason that underlies that is greed. It really always has been throughout all of history.
Yep.
And the rulers have always been greedy, whether it's the pharaohs or the Ming Dynasty or anybody else. The ones at the top always want the most good stuff. That's just human history.
Well, and that's true. That's completely true, Paul. The thing is that they're not the only ones, though. Because like I said, if middle-class Americans were willing to make some changes, but we're not. We're for the most part. I mean,
explore that, Joe. Why do you think that they're not?
Because you said about, before about valuing happiness. We've been convinced that happiness comes in the material. So we judge ourselves, our success in life, our happiness by our material. So I think that's a big part of the problem. So the idea of giving up, something that we have, I worked for that, that's mine. It's hard, to say, well, let's take a few, let's fly a little bit less, let's drive a little bit less, let's change our diet a little bit. The idea, and plus we value individual freedom to an unhealthy level. And to me, the perfect example of that are these people going and protesting the lockdowns, going out there and like with some of them with masks, ironically, and then the ones that are not wearing PPE, just like, well, my freedom is to run around and do things. It's like, yeah, but that's the whole punching people in the nose thing. They're not willing to recognize that we share this rock, and if the greed of I got to it, like I said, the last time, that libertarian idea, whoever's got the money can buy it, who got there first can take it kind of mentality, as opposed to a more sharing understanding that we are a social creature and none of us survives without the rest of us.
Right.
I had a back and forth with a guy last night who said that his rights are being trampled, and I said, your rights aren't being trampled. Name one. And he said his right to travel unmolested. And I said, you don't have a right to drive. He was talking about in a car, right? Because at first I thought he meant airplanes. And I said, you don't have a right to get onto an airplane without having a temperature screening. You don't have that right. He said, no, I meant in a car. Okay, but you don't have that right. You don't have a right to travel in a car unmolested because you don't have a right to travel in a car. Right. Driving is not a right.
Right. Yeah, it's a privilege. We were taught that in high school. Driving is a privilege, not a right. You need a license to do it. If you can't,
you need a license, you need a registration. There are fees involved. It's not a right. The only right you have to travel unmolested is by foot or by horse. That's it. Anything else? No. If you have to pay for a ticket, then you don't have a right for it. If you have to have the license or a registration, you don't have a right. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, and once I said that, the guy said, LOL, I'm out of here. And it's just like, laugh all you want.
Yeah.
You can laugh at me.
If being wrong is funny, you can laugh.
Exactly. Like you can laugh all you want, but you're still wrong.
Yeah. So. And that's really what it comes down to. And again, that hyper level of sense of individual freedom is another form of greed. It's the idea that I can do whatever I want, regardless of the consequences to anybody else. Which again, to me, is ironic to anyone with a libertarian mindset who thinks that if I do something and it hurts you, that I'm using force, and that's, you know, against the whole principle. Well, but you're ignoring it. If I go around spreading a disease, well, then I'm using force on everybody.
Yeah, I can't remember the famous person who said it. I think it's like a Greek philosopher, probably, but someone once said, might mangle the quote a little bit, but something like, men who want freedom without responsibility seek not freedom, but license.
I love that. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think about there's another YouTuber. I'm not going to mention his name, not because I don't want to embarrass him, just I don't want to boost him in any way. But you'll know who I'm talking about. He was, complaining about, he didn't want to have, to buy health insurance because he's like, well, I've never, I haven't consumed anywhere near as much money as I put through in. And then he lost his job. And then he got people in his family got sick, and then he was doing a GoFundMe and a Kickstarter and all this. Oh, please help pay my bills. Like, wow, you arrogant, hypocritical fuck. That you basically scoffed at the system that was built to protect all of us, and because you didn't get yours, and then as soon as you needed, all of a sudden you wanted everybody else to come into your aid. Bullshit. Fuck you. You didn't do it. You were.
Are you talking about Brett?
I don't.
No? Okay. I thought you were talking about Brett.
No. Well, the first two initials are EE of his channel.
All right. Okay. I don't think I know who you're talking about then.
I'll tell you in chat.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I thought you were talking about Brett Keane.
Oh, well, he's another good example.
Pretty much followed that exact MO, right? What you just described, Except he was more blatantly e-begging him. He was just sitting on his ass, doing video games and shit all day.
Oh, yes. That's right. That's right. Yeah. That dude's a total POS.
Yeah. He tried to start dramas with me on 3 separate occasions, and I never took the bait because I can't be bothered. You know what I mean? He tried on Twitter with me twice and on YouTube with me once. And I'm just like, bro, I don't take you seriously enough to care what you think, It's that simple.
The difference between him and Brett Keane is Brett Keane is a con artist. He's a complete scam artist. And I don't know if that makes him worse. I don't know. But the guy that you're talking about, Joe, he's a true believer.
Right.
Yeah, he's a true believer. Brett Keane he's a crook. He's a con artist. He'll do he'll say whatever he needs to say. He'll make up whatever he needs to make up. If it's going to bring money in through his PayPal, he'll do it. That guy, he's real. He's a true believer.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like with Brett, the way he kept going back and forth. I'm an atheist. This week he's an atheist, and he's a Christian again, back and forth. And I'm like, whatever.
He's getting foreclosed on, but then he's getting evicted from what they're renting, and then it's foreclosed. To make up your mind.
Yeah, right.
If you want people to help you, pick a story, stick to it.
Yeah, keep your lives consistent.
Yeah. Or he did have a considerable. Somehow he managed to get a reasonable following of loyal little assassins. I mean, he could have quite easily been a much more creative video maker and made actually decent videos, and he might have been able to make a success of his channel and do a Patreon thing like so many people were doing at that time. God knows he tried to do that, but he failed at it miserably because he was just such a jerk and tried to start all these bogus dramas because he thought that was going to be his ticket, and it just wasn't.
Well, who did?
Eviscerated him because he's a freaking pwn.
Who's that, Paul? Which channel is that? Oh, okay, I get you.
Yeah. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah,
that's a good question for the chat though. Hey guys, what do you think is worse, a true believer or a scam artist?
I know my feeling is a scam artist.
You think scam artist is worse?
Yeah, because the thing is, if you honestly believe something, look, obviously that person we were talking about, he's got a certain amount of cognitive dissonance going on in his head, right? So that's a human failing. We all can fall into, potentially fall into that. Okay, he really believes something, no matter how, and he's just believing something that's faulty. I believe if he actually could be convinced of something that's more factual, he would behave in that way. But a scam artist, they're like the worst kind of opportunist because they know better. So, like, I always use the example of slavery. Like whenever European people try to attack America for the fact that we had slaves. And it's like, well, so did the Europeans. And my thing is, after the Europeans declared slavery illegal in their own countries, their citizens continued to engage in the practice of selling slaves to the United States and elsewhere in North America and Central America. So I'm like, well, so you guys knew it was wrong and you continued to profiteer off of it, even though you knew that this was a moral weakness and a moral evil. So to me, that's worse because you know better. And I'll always, taking the exact same crime, I'll take someone who intentionally does it knowing that's wrong. That's worse than somebody who doesn't know better.
I agree. I agree. Basically, similar reasons. At least a true believer is sticking to his principles, no matter how faulty, no matter how flawed. But at least he's sticking to principles. And a scam artist has none.
Right.
So
that's pretty much where I'm at as well. I actually, from my point of view, the scam artist is worse for the reason of intent. They know, and they do it anyway. Televangelism is just a sophisticated form of begging. That's all it is. And it's actually not just sophisticated, but it's quite diabolical in its sophistication because of its reach and also because of the fact that they're mangling and manipulating a religion which, at its best has some potential to make people, go a decent way in life, but at its worst, they're doing this shit.
Kenneth Copeland. I mean, he's the one that they're talking about a lot lately. Kenneth Copeland. I mean, he's been doing it for decades and decades. But I mean, just recently, he thanked his congregation for his jet.
Right.
He thanked his congregation for his jet and his new suit.
I saw that.
Like my suit, you paid for it. I mean, it's just and they still give him money. They still give. I mean, I'm sorry, if I was giving money to an organization like a church, and which I would never do, obviously, if I was. And the minister, the preacher, whatever, says, hey, like my duds, you paid for them. I'm like, well, hey, enjoy that because you're not getting another dime.
Right.
Well, especially that's the reason why I find them to be particularly vile, is because they mostly prey on people who are vulnerable, who don't have a lot. Look, if con artists are all bad, but if you're scamming rich people who with more money than sense, okay, whatever. But if you're standing there and you're standing on a mountain of money and you're telling little old grannies who are they have nothing, very little in life, all they have is that their hope, their faith, whatever they have, and you tell them, well, you send me all your money and God's going to reward you, and they do that with the honest intentions. I'm like, wow, you're vile. And I came to the conclusion that they can't, at least the ones that like, remote, the bulk of these guys, they can't possibly believe in the God that they tout. Because if they did, they would know, if that God actually existed that they supposedly believe in, they would be doomed. They would be, so you couldn't possibly go out there and rob little grannies of their change if you actually believed there was a God that was going to smite you for it later on.
BrayTuber in the chat just said something great. A scam artist can't exist without true believers. There you go. That's fantastic.
That's true.
That's great.
And because of that problem, the true believers feed it. And what I don't understand is, do they lose their true belief if you give all your money on this bet that that it's going to make your life better, and then your life doesn't get better? Does that rock your belief at all? I wouldn't know. Never done it.
I don't think so. I think what happens is they'll blame the con artist, saying, I still believe, I just put my faith in the wrong person. He took advantage of my belief, but I still believe.
Right.
I think that's what's more likely to happen. It's easier to point the finger than it is to examine your beliefs.
Well,
and this goes into what happens with Trump fans, that exact dynamic.
Wow, look, full circle again.
Yeah.
What's bizarre
that goes back into believing in a man and all that kind of stuff that we're talking about just before Joe got here. It's just like I don't really understand how. To me, that's prehistoric thinking. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just, I don't understand how we're in that mindset. That's and I don't really know when it happened, but when I moved to this country 30 years ago, Americans didn't revere the royal family in any way other than Princess Diana, because she was kind of cute, and you know, she was saturated on the media. But other than Princess Diana, and but nowadays, like, I know loads of people who are like, "Oh, the Queen's really great," and I mean, in America, and like all the Harry and Meghan stuff that went on for months and months and months, and they were like well into it. I'm like, why do you?
That drives me nuts.
I am like, it boggles my mind. The American fascination with the royal family is mind-boggling. I mean, I don't understand it at all. I myself, though, have an interest in the royal family, though, because I am a descendant of the Duke of York.
Oh wow, 95th in line for the throne. Well done.
I actually, yes, I am descendant from British royalty. So,
But the current monarchy or the previous ones?
the previous, yeah, no,
Yeah, I go. Mine goes back to Hastings.
so it's just like, it's pretty cool, you know. I am a descendant of the De La Poles. So it was Richard, the Duke
Right.
of York, and all the males in the family were beheaded, and their heads
Wow.
were put on pikes. And there were two that escaped. One was a cardinal in Vatican, and the other hid at the Vatican so he didn't get killed. And it was his offspring that eventually made it to the States. So that's who I'm a descendant of,
Neat.
Wow.
which is really wild stuff. But outside of that, I could give a shit about the royal family.
Yeah.
Um,
To what you guys were talking about before, you'll probably recognize the lyrics. You take a mortal man and put him in control. Watch him become a god. Watch people's heads a roll. Just like Pied Piper led rats through the streets, we dance like marionettes, swaying to the symphony of destruction.
I was going to say, that sounds like Megadeth.
It is.
Wow. Well played. Yeah, good one. No,
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings, because on the one hand, you know, I was successfully brainwashed as a child to think that royalty was inherently unethical and wrong, right? And I actually have grown up and re-examined that brainwashing and realized that even though I was brainwashed, they were right. It is wrong. There's no excuse for anyone to be born into political power to whatever degree. It doesn't matter how much she does or doesn't exercise her political power. She shouldn't have any. She shouldn't have any. Having said that, the reason the monarchy is popular in this country to this day, in my opinion, and I'm a Yankee, so I don't know how much my opinion counts, but I've been here for 30 years, and I think the Queen has comported herself so well for so long. She's the longest reigning monarch in British history, and she's barely ever set a foot wrong in 70-something years or whatever it is.
Yeah,
She's Queen.
She is socially inept. Always has been. She has no people skills. Um, but the skills that she has and her social ineptness has served her well as monarch. And when she does make a statement, which is rare, more times than not, she hits the tone that's needed.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
One of the secrets to her popularity. More times than not, she's been able to strike the tone that's been needed for the moment. Her most recent speech about COVID-19.
Yeah, it was perfect.
They were in tears, and it was just like, you know. And I watched her statement, and I was just like, oh, she nailed it. She nailed it. Good job. Good.
Yeah. And over here in this country, that we get treated to that kind of thing once every year, because the Queen gives a speech on Christmas Day every year, and they're very much in a similar sort of vein. You know, well done to all the first responders, or well done to all the nurses, or all the veterans, or she'll pick something, one or all sometimes of these things, or the young people coming up, blah blah blah, whatever. Very inspirational, very sort of, you know, matronal and all that kind of thing, which is what you want from a queen, I suppose. But the thing is, you know. The irony for me, right, as a sort of passive observer of this, because I'm not involved in British culture when it comes to the monarchy, but I have observed it with great interest and satisfaction, because for years and years and years, especially in the 90s when I was first here, they're like, oh, Charles should never be king. Charles should never be king.
I don't think he ever will.
You know, people, generally speaking, don't like Charles. You know, he's not. He doesn't really have a huge popular following, except for the actual truest hardcore royalists, right? But what really cracks me up is you'll get a poll and they'll say, you know, do you support the monarchy? And you'll get like 90% of the people will say yes or something like that. And then the next question will be, do you think Charles should ever be king? And it'll be like 60%. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, which is it? You know, do you support the monarchy or not? You know,
I don't. I don't think he's ever going to be king. I think that old bat is going to hold on as long as possible, just to make sure he never becomes king.
Oh wow, that's yeah. I don't know. I think she's
opinion,
already 95 or 94 or whatever. I don't know. She just
she's
had her
going to live to
birthday the other day.
130 if she needs to.
Well, her mother, Rob, her mother lives to be 101.
Right. Yeah, I
So
remember
she's
that.
going to hang on as long as it takes to make sure he never gets the throne.
As anti-monarchy as I am, because I'm the same way you, Paul. Like, yeah, I was brainwashed to be against it, but I'm like completely against even the notion of it. And I find all the arguments that support, in support of it, to be frivolous,
Yeah.
and spurious and not factually based. But I still kind of feel bad for him, only because if you're bred for a job like that, you're told from when you're a child, this is your job. One day it's gonna be a job, and you're prepared. You do all the stuff, and you live by all the rules, and you do all the things, all that are expected of you, and then you're just there to like, when the hell am I gonna get to do this job? If he's already,
I was thinking about that last week or the week before. Because, I mean, he spent his entire life preparing, and Charles isn't that popular there. He's not that popular here either. There's not a whole big, oh wow, Charles one day will be king. I think his sons have a lot more popularity than he does.
Sure.
But he was diagnosed with COVID a couple weeks ago.
Right.
As soon as he got the diagnosis, his thought was, "Are you fucking kidding me? If that bitch is gonna outlive me."
Well, here's the other thing I realized that's kind of funny about it too. It's something I asked Suzanne the other day. I'm like, well, because everyone's been focused on obviously him, but then obviously, like you said, his sons, like they'll eventually, William will eventually be king, and Harry, will be just a prince. But I thought about this: if Charles were to die before his mother dies or abdicates the throne, then they're not in the line of succession anymore. Andrew is. And no one's thought about Andrew and his offspring.
That's not true. That's not true. No, that's not true. No, Charles is the next in line for the throne. Then it's William. Then it's George, William's firstborn son.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if he dies while his mother is still queen, I think if you look in the past, that's kind of how.
No, it would go to William after the queen.
While he was still alive. I don't know.
If the queen died and Charles is already dead, it would go to Charles's son.
See, the thing is, in past, like, because I'm descended from like one of the Henrys.
In the past,
and basically, Ellen of Aquitaine, she, basically the one who was supposed to be king, he was king, and then he died. And then and actually because there was no heir, went to his brother and all this kind of stuff.
All right,
so it has gone laterally.
I could be wrong about it, but I'm pretty sure that as far as Andrew's concerned, if Prince Charles died, Andrew would have to become the Prince of Wales first before he could become the king.
Okay.
But I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that.
That would be really funny though.
Wales is in line for the throne. I know that.
Because it would be really funny considering
what Joe was talking about
Andrew and his descendants at all.
It's kind of archaic. Right. Like that line of succession that you're talking about, Joe. Yeah, they used to do it that way, but that is kind of archaic. I don't think they do it that way.
I'm pretty sure they don't, but I could be wrong. I like I say, I don't give enough of a damn about it to really look into it.
Fair enough.
But I'll tell you on a related issue. A couple of months ago, when my gal came over to visit me from America, we went to Hampton Court, which is pretty close to where I live. Hampton Court is the castle that Henry VIII lived in when he beheaded all of his wives and all that kind of stuff. Right? It's about maybe 3 miles from where I live. And so this is a pretty grand English castle, and you walk around it, and there's like all these portraits of the people who used to live in the castle at the time, from hundreds of years ago. And like, you think about it, these pictures have been in the same fucking place for like 400 years, right? and there's a certain thing when you walk around old buildings. I mean, like really old buildings, right? And you kind of there's a kind of time machine kind of thing that happens in your head because the building hasn't changed. It's the same. Was exactly the same as it was when Henry VIII was there. And you go see like Anne Boleyn's bedchamber, whatever, and all this. It's the same. It's but the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's and compared to some castles, Hampton Court is actually quite restrained. But still, the overblown, ostentatious display of wealth in a fucking castle, right? And that was what these people were all about. And it reminds me. Because it's not, a castle isn't just a fortress so that, someone from the neighboring castle's army doesn't come and get you. No, it's to keep the peasants out as well. That's why you got a wall going all around your land, to keep the peasants off it. And so you can work your own land and keep the deer on your land and all this kind of stuff, Anyway, but what I'm saying about the whole ostentatious, like it's not just about leading the people. It's about me, look at me. I'm so important. Look at me. And then I think of Trump Tower, right? And all of Trump's buildings have to have his name on them and all this kind of shit. And I realize that Trump really does want to be king. I mean, people have said that, and I think, we're Americans. We don't really think in those terms. And he might not actually have that word in his head. I couldn't speak for the man, obviously. But I think he does want to be king because he already has that sort of look at how rich I am thing going on. I mean, that's how he started his campaign. I've got $8 billion. And then the next day he said, I've got $10 billion. And the next day I've got $9 billion.
Well, and you think about what he said the other day when he tried to say that his power was absolute. It was like even some Republicans were like, whoa, hold on a second, because that's some scary shit for a sitting president to say.
Well, yeah. I don't even know where to take that one. No, sorry, I lost my train of thought completely. I went off the rails. I had a mind fart.
Well, one thing always gets to me about when people who try to defend the monarchy, and if you bring up the cost, all the money that people say, the public, ends up giving them, and then someone says, oh, and they also, with the taxes and all that, and I've heard like one thing is like, oh well, but they were rich on their own. I'm like, no. Their dynasty earned money because they were the head of state and they basically were able to give themselves priority everything. And
technically, I mean, they own Canada and Australia.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. If you think about Paul said about the king's deer, at one point in England, it was illegal to hunt deer in any of the king's forest because that belonged to the king. So you could be hung for feeding your family because and of course the king was never going to eat all those deer, but it didn't matter. It was his deer.
It's still true now that all the deer in the country are property of the queen. That's right. Still true. And then right over those hills, there's about 200 deer in Richmond Park, and they're all property of the queen. And every year there's a cull, and the bucks with the most horns get culled, and that's just how it works, And yeah, swans are also the queen's property. There might be some more animals as well, but I know swans for sure, and all the deer are definitely property of the queen. It wouldn't surprise me if wolves and bears were, but I don't think there's any bears left, to be honest. I doubt it.
Does that include the animals in like Canada and Australia?
I don't know about that. I couldn't say for sure. I doubt it. I don't think the queen owns Canada or that Britain owns Canada. I think the queen's simply the head of state there. That she's definitely the head of state in Australia and Canada and
she's the head of state in Australia, but
from what possibly India as well.
That the land is under like a contract.
Well, there is a certain truth to that, Rob, because I remember getting in an argument with a Canadian a number of years ago that they were complaining about the whole softwood tariff thing the U.S. has had, a fight with them for like the last 30 years. And part of the issue is that, U.S. the stumpage fee is charged by the people who own the property. So if I have a large bit of property and I got trees and you want to cut down my trees, I charge you so much per stump, whatever, and it's market based. Whereas in Canada, the issue was that it was all considered Queensland, And so the government owned it, and they could basically charge whatever they wanted, even well below market rates. And so the U.S. had the tariff because there's an unfair trade practice because you're not letting the market decide the rate. You're just arbitrarily coming up. It effectively amounted to a government subsidy.
Right.
So I think there may be some truth to what you're saying to some degree. I'm not sure exactly, but maybe somebody piped in and said Canada is no longer owned by Great Britain.
Yeah. Green Machine said that. Yeah. Like I said, I think the Queen's just the head of state there. I'm pretty sure. And in fact, I know that's true, but I'm not sure about the ownership issue. So the head of state just means that, she's technically, would be the one to represent the country abroad, for whatever reason. But obviously she's too old for that now. So she would have delegated that now to whoever. I mean, she pretty much, her royal duties have been all delegated down now because she's so frail and old, and traveling risks her health, it's as simple as that. So,
well, I mean, even without that, I mean, it's like a power, like there's a power that just can't be used. I mean, she has basically the power to say to the Canadian government, you're just not relevant anymore. To which the response would be, yeah, do something about it. I mean, there's not much. It's a useless power. It's a useless throne.
Okay, here's my argument with that. Right, I'm not saying you're wrong, but people make this argument in favor of the monarchy. What you're just saying, she doesn't have any real power. She just opens up Parliament, and it's a ceremonial position for the most part. Okay, well, this Queen twice in her reign has chosen the Prime Minister. Right. I think once when there was a hung parliament, and another time she called him the prime minister to form a unity government. And I think that was around about the late 50s, early 60s, in that sort of time frame. So she hadn't even been queen for very long. And here's the thing. I was very active in 2002, a bit of a little activist locally where I lived at the time, because we all could see the Iraq war was marching forward, and we didn't want it to happen. On February, I think it was February 13th of 2003, there was like 2 million people on the streets of London.
Oh, wow.
Marching against the war. I took my son all the way from Cornwall to be in that march. He was only like 11 or something at the time. Anyway, so there was 2 million people on the street. 2 million people, and the theme of the march was "Not in my name." You can't do this with my army and my name. No, not in my name. The one person who could have said "not in my name" and it made a difference is the Queen, because if the Queen said to the army, not to the government, to the army, if she said "not in my name," I guarantee you it wouldn't matter what the government ordered. The army follows the Queen. He's the commander of the army, and they won't go against what she says. So the fact, Rob, that she didn't say "not in my name" means there's nothing a government can do that she'll oppose now. If you're going to go to war against a country that never attacked you, what's off the table after that?
Right.
So
the other thing that gets me, one of the arguments I always find hilarious is that they'll say, "Oh, well, if we got rid of the monarchy, it hurt tourism." I'm like, yeah, okay. I've been to Britain 4 times, just only to England, but I've never had lunch with Liz. So the idea, no one's going there. It's not like you're going to go there to see the Queen. And as far as the historic, a lot of them are national trust anyway, so they'll still be available. And in the cases where they are semi-privately owned, those lords, that's their source of incomes. They're going to continue to allow you to come in and see their castles because they need to make money. They don't have a real job, so that's what they do. So that tourism wouldn't be affected a whit.
So the government's control of the military in the UK is a technicality, that their loyalty is to the Queen.
As far as I'm aware, it's the Queen's army. Yeah, that's my understanding. The government is obviously in control of the army in the chain of command, but I'm pretty sure that the Queen is on top of them, and the government is assumed to have the Queen's consent. That's why they have the right to govern. What I'm saying is, if the Queen actually had said publicly, which she would never do because it would be the most political thing she say, not in my name, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have happened. I'm pretty sure. Because it's, like I say, it's the Queen's army, and I think it would have been a constitutional crisis, which might have actually, ended the monarchy. And I'm sure that's why she didn't say it. But because I'm pretty sure the Queen didn't want that war to happen.
That's interesting. But
Yeah.
that's just wow. I mean, that's a lot of power for not so much for her because she's not going to do it, but for future monarchs. I mean, isn't that's kind of like that's a sword that a future monarch could wield if they wanted to.
You see, in the sense, she's not a political figure, but in the sense, so I don't mean politics in the literal sense, but the Queen is quite politically savvy in the sense of what it takes to keep the royal family going, to make sure that the institution of monarchy does not perish, because it's very hard to make an argument for monarchy in the 21st century. Especially to the degree that the monarchy exists in this country. There's plenty of European countries that still have technically a queen or whatever. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, I think all have royalty, but you never see them,
So let's for argument's sake say that the Queen dies tomorrow, and Charles is overcome with joy that he actually will be king, and decides as king with a military at his disposal, says, yeah, the constitutional monarchy has been dissolved. I am king. I am these lands, and this is all mine. It is mine. And he has, like I said, the military at his disposal because it is at that point the king's army. What's to stop that?
I think basically the ramifications, because it wouldn't necessarily just happen like that. There would be pushback, and the pushback would be legitimate. So I think that you can't imagine anybody that's actually been bred to be royal to take that posture. You could be like Donald Trump, say, for example, and just be a spoiled brat and be bred rich. Right. But that's different. These people, I'm not defending the monarchy by any stretch of the imagination, but these people are trained from the youngest years of their life to maintain this institution at all costs, and what it takes to maintain it, what you have to present to the world, what traditions you have to adhere to, and why.
Then establishing
that kind of stuff.
Reestablishing the monarchy as it was, when the Queen took the reins, reestablishing that would be seen as jeopardizing the royal family, jeopardizing the existence of the monarchy.
I think anything whatsoever. I mean, if the Queen made a comment, for example, about any government policy, even if the Queen said, "I wish there wasn't so many homeless people," that's a political statement. That's going too far for the Queen, right?
So the monarchy, as it exists now, is so tenuous. It is so delicate, that trying to reconsolidate its power to glory days, whatever that means,
can't happen.
To its glory days, it just is far too dangerous to even attempt.
Yeah, it can't happen. The government wouldn't let it happen. There would be a constitutional crisis between the government and the monarchy. The government is better poised to win that argument. That this country has fought wars to get to the point where the monarch is practically neutered, right? I mean, this country's had one civil war for sure that I know about, which was exactly that point, because the king was too powerful. And of course, that's what Magna Carta was all about as well. The people told the king what his powers were rather than the other way around. That's for the first time in this country's history that the people said, no, we're not going to let you get away with this, and this.
Obviously.
One codicil of that. Magna Carta It's interesting because I had a discussion with some, actually it was a British guy who's really into history who corrected me, because I said, okay, well, Magna Carta was like maybe the most important document, and then maybe the Declaration of Independence, and then the U.S. Constitution. He said no. He said Magna Carta was a compact between the king and his lords. Basically, the lords said, hey, our rights as lords are not being respected. Our rights as property, as feudal property.
Right.
So
well, yeah, now, it was the beginning of property ownership.
It did because because basically what it did was it opened up the whole notion that the king's power was not absolute. So it didn't really give any power back to the masses, but it opened the door to the idea that the king is not an absolute.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's what I meant to say. You know, that the king's powers were limited by those underneath them, and not the other way around. You know, where the absolute monarchy was, you know, a thing of the past. And
there was a whole series of events that little by little, using your words, neutered the monarchy. So now it's just to a point where they're just walking a tightrope at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they want to continue to exist because, frankly, in my opinion, they live among the most privileged lives in the world. The royal family, even the moderately extended royal family, it lives lives of immense privilege. And you could argue that, you know, they try to give back. I mean, for example, Charles and Andrew both served in the military. Harry and William both served in the military. You don't see Trump sending his kids in the military.
Very true.
Right? They serve. Service is part of what they're trained to do. And they actually do it. See, so this is why it makes it kind of hard for people who are naturally sort of Republican in monarch sense. I'm a Republican. I think it should be a republic. We shouldn't have a monarch, you know? So having said that, they make it really hard not to like them by they actually do the services. They actually do go around and open hospitals and meet people and press the flesh and shake hands and you know, do what the people expect them to do, which is to get out there, get involved, represent the country in a way which makes them feel good about themselves. That's their job.
Such an odd setup you guys have over there.
It's odd for sure. I don't really necessarily support it, but I see the wisdom in some of it. Like the House of Lords is another example. I mean, it's changed an awful lot since I was here. When I first came here, the House of Lords was like completely like, you know, I think there was like there were some of them were like cardinals and stuff from the churches, and then there was the rest of them were like all landed gentry, you know, landowners and all that. And obviously, some of them were appointed by sitting governments. So there would be some labor people in there who were appointed by labor governments, and some labor conservatives were appointed by conservative governments. But for the most part, it was landed gentry and the Church of England hierarchy, right? But in the 90s, they started to change that to more appointed and less inherited people. But nevertheless, the House of Lords, there was a few times, especially when Tony Blair was prime minister, where the government was basically abusing its executive power because they had a gigantic majority and could get away with anything they wanted to get away with. And the House of Lords was the only entity that could possibly and did put brakes on that, even though they're not elected. You know, they're put there. But still, they took their responsibility seriously. So this is the thing this is why I get angry sometimes. You know, I understand, for example, when I talk to Brock Lawley, and Brock is naturally sort of suspicious of government, and so am I, of course, and not just government, but authority in general, and so am I, of course. But there is such a thing as benevolent authority. I think it's something we could strive for and demand, in fact. But what we allow is corrupted government instead. We allow it. It couldn't happen if we didn't allow it. You know, and it's my fault as much as anybody else's fault, because we elect these people that we know are corrupt because, well, reasons, you know, too deep to go into. But like the anti-corruption laws were a lot stronger in the past, and they've just eroded away at them. In the 70s, you couldn't get away with half the shit they get away with now in Congress. No way. Right. You know? But They've just, you know, written the laws to favor themselves over the course of the past 35, 40 years or whatever, you know, and now we're all stuck with two political parties, the people who are driving the wheels of these parties, not the membership necessarily, but the people who have their hands on the wheels of these parties are all corrupt as fuck on both sides. And until we solve the corruption problem, every other problem will not get solved.
I mean,
Well,
that's
and
what
the
it comes
thing,
down
like you
to.
said, though, a lot of it is because our own complacency. Because again, we're the ones who vote or don't.
Or don't.
And I got in an argument with somebody. Hey, Tommy, about the because I said, look, the primaries are where that's your time to try to solve these. If you don't think the person is going to be representing one side or the other is right, you can go do something about it. But then people get mad and like, well, did you go out and did you support your person? No. Well, then like, what are you going to do? It's like, well, you can't get mad at the system because you stayed home. Like I think turnout this time was like, it's typical. It was like in the 12 to 15% range. So all those people who had a different opinion of what we ended up with, there was enough to literally support almost any of the candidates, really, other than maybe some of the fringe ones. But you think of like the top 10 candidates, there were enough people who didn't show up on primary day who could have made a difference for their candidate and didn't show up. So and then they complain about the results.
Well, and the you have to really do a deep dive on why people don't vote. I think I don't know if you saw Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 11/9. Have you seen it?
Bits of it, not the whole thing.
Well, okay, because the first one, Fahrenheit 9/11, of course, that was about George Bush and all that sort of thing, and winning over Al Gore and all that. This one was Fahrenheit 11/9 because 11/9 was the day after Trump won in 2016, and it starts off just the same. Was it all just a dream? And it's very much the same, and he makes an awful lot of really good points in the movie. And the thing I like about the movie most of all is he doesn't leave anybody out when he's apportioning blame. He hits everybody. He hits Trump, obviously. He hits the media. He hits Obama. He hits Hillary. He hits the Democratic Party, and he points to a solution, which is us, which is the people, which is we have to do something about this shit because no one's going to save us. No one's going to save us. There's no Superman in Congress. There's nobody, and the only person who is close enough to that, I suppose, and I know I'm biased, but I mean, I thought Bernie actually come from a good moral place, and I think he really had a lot of determination to do some really good things. So we had that chance, but apparently, the media was hell bent on not letting that happen. I'm digressing from my original point. I can't remember what it was. What are you gonna say, Joe?
Well, I was going to say though, but again, okay, yeah, certainly, and I know that was a lot of people's complaint that okay, the media wasn't for Bernie, and I don't disagree with that, but again. That's not an excuse not to get out there if you and whether it's I
could not agree more.
And that's the problem where I get pissed off because I get so many people they want to lump the blame on everything else, and it's like, well, did you do your part? And even okay, you mentioned like people are looking for they're really looking for saviors, and that's why I think people like Trump they need him to be a savior, so he is whether he is one or not.
Right.
Like Obama, like okay, he didn't do everything I wanted him to do. I knew he wasn't going to. Particularly with most of the time having a hostile Congress, but there were a lot of people who felt like, oh, I voted for Obama, so now it's all up to him. Like, no, that's not how the fucking thing works. Voting isn't where it ends; is where
right. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even
when they was doing healthcare, obviously a public option was one of the things originally on the table. And the reason why people got mad at him for taking off, the reason why is because nobody was calling their senators and their House members saying, we demand a public option. Because if there had been, I'm sure that they would have fought for it, but there wasn't. So they basically said, well, we're not going to expend political capital when the support's kind of soft.
Well, again, getting back to why people don't vote. In Fahrenheit 9/11, Fahrenheit, the second one, Fahrenheit 11/9, he explores that to a big degree because Michael Moore makes the point that in 2016, 110 million people didn't vote, who could have voted. So he makes the point that the largest political party in America is non-voters.
Right.
Yeah. They're the ones who, from my point of view, that's the biggest reservoir of potential voters to attract. So the Democratic Party should never make any attempt to attract Republicans ever. They shouldn't look in that direction. They should be looking at these non-voters and saying, how can we get these people to vote? It's more that's where the voters are. It's much more easy to support someone who's not to convince someone who's not ideologically driven than someone who is ideologically driven. Why are you even looking at those people? Let them win. Let them have their candidate. We don't need to give them part of our candidate.
Two things. One, what's up, Kazoom?
Hey,
And the other thing, like what Joe was saying about not going out to support your candidate. And while that's true, that happens and happens to all candidates. People choose their candidates based on what they see in the media. So when you have major news outlets talking about one candidate and comparing them to Nazis, saying, "Oh wow, look, he won this. You know, he did so well in this one primary. It was like the Nazis invading France."
Yeah,
That keeps people away from supporting that person. When you paint a picture, when they reported on the media over and over again that Bernie Sanders spent his honeymoon in Moscow, well, that was
which is not true.
That's just a lie. I mean, it just
right.
isn't true.
Well, the thing
But they
about
reported it as if it was true, and that keeps people away from the candidate.
Well, the thing about though Bernie's victory, I heard what Chris Matthews said, and to me, because it's an analogy, right? It's like he's not saying Bernie's a Nazi, and
Of course.
anybody, I mean, and besides, anyone who would think Bernie was a Nazi is a freaking moron. But you know, the idea, like, basically, he's just saying maybe he could have turned it around. He got beat. You know, he could have said that his opponent got beat as bad as the French did, and then this way you leave the Nazis out of it, and you make the same point.
Right. And that's the problem, though. Is not everybody follows politics the way you and I do.
Right.
I mean, you know, we're junkies.
Yeah, I agree. So hi, Kazoom, how's it going? You jumped into an interesting part of the conversation.
Hey, I didn't know what was going on before it, so I just came in when you're talking about the voting, and now you're talking about how mainstream media tars and feathers candidates that they don't like. I'm still upset. Even back in 2004 with how media Howard Dean, yeah, they just because he got excited during a speech, and that was enough to get them to. It just seems like mainstream media are the ones that choose the primary candidates, and not, you know, because they have so much control over the people. Yeah,
I mean, the argument can be made that it's intentional. The argument can be made that it's unintentional. But one way or the other, whether it's intentional or not, they are leaning heavily on the scales.
Rob, I've got to stop you. With all due respect, the argument cannot be made that it's not intentional. How many people it filters through before it gets to you to watch on the screen? It goes through editors and the people who write it and the people who do all the research to get all the little graphics up. Every single one of those people has to pass those people before it gets.
Agree.
So
I agree. I was giving the other side.
Possibly be.
I was giving the other side some elbow room. I do agree. Look at 2016, when the day that Hillary announced that she was running, there was reporters running, knocking each other over, trying to get close enough to her. She was on the highway traveling. They had stopped at a rest area, and there was a parade of reporters in vans around her, and they were literally falling over each other, trying to get close to her. And that was the day she announced. Most candidates announce they're at a podium in their hometown, surrounded by a small group of people. There's a couple of cameras. Nothing like the circus that surrounded her. And that immediately put the image into everyone's heads. This is the front runner. This is not only
well, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that, but you have to admit that we've been getting groomed to expect Hillary to be the president since she was the first lady.
Well, and that's the reason why I would say that, you know, that I could make the argument that it's not necessarily intentional. See, to the media, she's a rock star. So they so just like John Edwards, you know, they liked John Edwards. He was a vacuous, empty suit, but he was photogenic and he talked a certain way. He was homespun and sounding and all that. And they because remember, when it comes to the media, Fox News aside, their agenda generally isn't necessarily one candidate or one particular idea. It's money. It's ratings. It's so who's the most photogenic? Who's the most controversial? Who's going to fill that space?
But you agree that has that has an impact
Oh,
on the viewer.
absolutely.
When you portray a candidate as all but one,
Right.
well, I mean, you've pretty much just handed it to them.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the reason why I say that's why I say that was the intent part. Again, we're talking about whether something's better or worse with intent. See, to me, I think in a way, ironically, it's a little bit more reckless because is a little kind of a turnabout because if you're doing something without examining. Because the media has such a power, and they have such responsibility. They should have some certain level of responsibility. And when they do things recklessly without thinking at all, think about them following Trump around. Because again, Trump's a big show, and how many hundreds of hours of free media that he got during it. Because what is he? Because to him, he was a joke, but he was controversial. What's he going to say next? What's he going to do next?
Right.
So
Exactly.
They don't get elected.
So this is why I thank God for segments of the Bernie Bros and the Yang Gang and the Warren supporters that were standing up during saying, hey, we're not getting airtime. My guy is being ignored. And it's intentional.
Yeah. I mean, what happened to Andrew Yang is beyond the pale. It was not okay. I'm surprised more people didn't cry racist about it, but to me, it had a bit of a racist flavor to it. I mean, they didn't turn the guy's microphone on unless they asked him a question. He's the only person they did that to, and I can't see any logical explanation. So therefore, I search for the illogical or more impassionate explanation because there is no logical explanation.
Hey, I was a Booker supporter, and he got almost no airtime. So trust me, I know where you're coming from.
But I mean, when the supporters point that out, because most people wouldn't be aware. So when the diehard supporters point it out, two things happen. A certain segment of the viewers say, yeah, you're right. And another segment says, oh, you're just a bunch of crybabies, oh, you Bernie bros, just go back. You've done enough damage. But I mean, thank God they're there though, because they're the only thing that keeps any integrity left in the process. They are the guard dogs.
Yeah,
I will say I'm very happy to be in a stream with Kazoom. It's the first time we've actually been in a stream together.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Hey, there's something I want to bring up here real quick, guys. Look at this one.
Oh, holy shit! Really?
Oh,
yeah. Apparently. I've seen there's been rumors about that for a couple of days, but I guess it must be official or Tommy wouldn't have said it.
I don't think so. I think there's conflict. Well, Tommy said it, so yeah,
That's right. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Some are saying he's in a vegetative state. Others are saying that he's dead. So I don't know if it's been confirmed one way or the other yet. But it looks like
I don't know who's going to be the successor. They were saying about his sister or whatever, and I saw someone on Twitter say, "Oh, if the leader of North Korea turns out to be Kim Jong-un's sister, that'd be a major leap forward for feminism." And I only hope they were being fucking sarcastic.
Oh, bro. They can impress with the best of them, right?
Well, I mean, so
begins the reign of the undead. Braytube. So begins the reign of the undead. I think there's a certain amount of possibility to that. There's a certain amount of we're not going to tell anybody he's dead, and we're just going to keep going on like he's still here.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Right? Yeah, Weekend at Bernie's. Yeah.
Well, I just see this article. It says from New York Post, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un rumored to be dead, brain dead, or just fine. And all I can think about is, this. On CNN, they had this. They said experts. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they were saying experts agree Bin Laden is dead or alive.
Yeah, it's Schrodinger's Kim. Schrodinger's Kim.
Yes, right. Yes, right. Dictator. Yeah, Fox News was saying he was a vegetative state nine hours ago, but then it's Fox News, so who knows?
Right. So, what do you make of? I think it was the other day, this week just gone. Trump said that if he hadn't been elected president, we would have already gone to war with North Korea. Obviously, that's not true, but more to the point, that's wildly irresponsible.
Yeah.
Just in general, but mostly because Kim Jong-un isn't necessarily the most stable leader either, and he doesn't like being provoked. So, and he launched like 2 missiles in the past month. So what the hell is Trump playing at with that shit? I mean,
Well, I mean, and he was provoking early on in his presidency. He spent a lot of time provoking.
yeah, until they arranged the first meeting, he was all provocative, and all of a sudden something
Rain
flipped.
of
I guess they
fire.
agreed to the meeting, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, when someone probably said in Trump's ear, Obama never met with him, you know, he's like, oh, I can do something Obama's never done. Sign me up.
I want to meet Trump, and I can tell him Obama loved to breathe.
Yeah.
He was just going around breathing everywhere.
He was a breathing advocate.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, I'm a breathing advocate. I'm quite fond of breathing.
Yeah, I'm a fan of you breathing. Actually,
No, thank you.
I am. I'm particularly a fan of me breathing, but I'm especially a fan of the 3 of you breathing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a fan of it too. When Trump did his, I know I'm coming back around again, but I can't help it because it is on my mind. The whole thing about the injecting the disinfectants thing, because I really do feel like we've gone to, and I know everyone's pronounced Trump dead like a million times, so I'm not stupid enough to pronounce Trump dead over this one statement. You know, on the other hand, even Trump supporters are having a really hard time. Even Fox News had a really hard time not taking the piss out of it.
Right.
You know, because it's just blatantly, obviously bad advice for one thing, and he was not being sarcastic. So once he said he was being sarcastic, he's like, dude, just own it. You were wrong. Just own it.
On my Facebook,
Yeah.
one of my friends on Facebook actually posted a thing. He started it saying, "I am not defending any position or any politician, but," and he posted this study about how tiny amounts of bleach is safe to be injected into the human body. That a lot of drug users will do that when they clean their needles, and they will inject bleach.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, okay, you know, and holding your head under the water for a certain amount of time is perfectly safe too.
Yeah, I've seen people eat light bulbs. I wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's just beyond absurd. Although I have seen a small number of people who basically, on the one hand, saying that it's actually a useful technique. Oh, and also arguing that he's being sarcastic. I'm like, well, either he was saying something that was useful or he was kidding. But to say he was kidding about something useful, then now that you've totally torpedoed both arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ken Jennings, who won all that money on Jeopardy, he tweeted that he wanted to announce now that all of his wrong answers on Jeopardy were just a joke.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well, see, what pisses me off is that when Trump does it, that it seems to work. Like he walks back all manner, and it's one thing. Look, every politician makes gaffes. Every politician says something stupid one time or another. They're all people. They'll say something that's inaccurate or just out and out false or even a lie. But I've just never seen I've never seen supporters so Pollyanna that they'll just, it doesn't matter. He can literally say, you know, X is true, and then in the next sentence say X is not true, and they'll say it's not a contradiction.
He's done that loads of times. He's done exactly that loads of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what hurts my brain.
Yeah, it's time to open everything up, but George is moving too fast.
And here's the thing. Here's the evil genius of Donald Trump. He does that exact thing that you described. He'll contradict himself sometimes in the same sentence, but lots more often it'll be in the same sort of thought paragraph, right? Where he'll say the beginning of the paragraph, and by the end of the paragraph, he's come all the way around to the other side. And then people like me and you will make a fuss about it, and then they're rubbing their hands in glee. He's really owned them libs again. That's what it's about. He knows he's doing it. He knows he's doing it. He knows he says stupid shit because it will get the reaction that it gets, and they love that reaction.
his evil genius is that he doesn't care.
No, that's the evil
what it
part. I
is.
grant you that.
Yeah, yeah. He's a complete lack
Yeah,
of
see,
faith.
I think what it comes down to is being a part of what a con man tries to do is appeal to everybody or as many people as possible. So by putting, so basically, you know, and so it's in the past, people usually use the expression plausible deniability, where they'll say conflicting things. The problem is for him is he doesn't say it in separate speeches. Like Paul said, it's literally like it could be in mid-sentence he can contradict something he's in the act of saying, and that's just too much for a lot of people, thankfully.
Well, yeah, I don't understand how come I honestly don't understand why he gets a pass on so many things, you know. Oh, he was just making a joke. Oh, he was, you know,
It's simple.
all the excuses that people have to make for him to do the things he does. And I know it's a fucking worn out record when people say, oh, if Obama did that, he would have been, you know, but it's true. They would never have
It's
let
simple.
him get away with a tenth, not a tenth, a thousandth of the things that Trump gets away with.
Well, I just can't believe when it gets pointed out, well, they say, well, Trump was just trolling. And I'm like, and you think that's a good thing for a president to troll the nation? Really?
He gets a pass because the party in power is more concerned with the Supreme Court and with federal court appointments. That's why he gets a pass. They'll let him do and say almost anything, as long as they can point to who they want to the bench,
Right.
because
Yep.
they're going to have a larger impact for generations to come by
Yep.
doing that.
And then that's one thing that I said, you know, in this election, last election cycle, you know, any particular candidate, I have my favorites, obviously, but ultimately I don't care as much because I'm looking at that broader picture. Who's going to be in the Supreme Court? Who's going to be on the district courts? You know, all these different things. You know, because I know that nobody who's in is going to be able to get to do everything they want. But there's those long-lasting things, like Trump's appointed so many judges to the federal bench.
25% of them.
Yeah. So basically, the damage is not. He could have a heart attack tomorrow on TV. It doesn't matter. The damage he's done is going to last for a generation.
Don't get my hopes up like that.
We can hope, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually don't want anything like that to happen, because, like, if the unfortunate happened and Trump did die in office, he would be lionized in history, and especially if someone killed him, that would be it. It'd be over. You know. I used to say the same thing when George Bush was president. I think, please, 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 nobody assassinate George Bush. Not only because I didn't want Dick Cheney to be president, which we wouldn't be here right now if Dick Cheney was president, but also because, like I said, George Bush would have been lionized in popular culture forever as the man who charged 9/11 and was killed by a terrorist or whatever. Here in this country, Channel 4 Films made a movie called Death of the President, or Death of a President, which was a mock documentary about that exact thing happening. And a terrorist shot him, and Dick Cheney became president. And it turned out that they arrested the wrong guy, but they left him in jail anyway. It was fucking heavy duty shit, man. And you know, while I'm on the subject of Dick Cheney, what a fucking dick Dick Cheney was, right? I'm so glad he's not in government anymore. But now we've got people who are arguably worse.
Oh,
because they literally robbed the treasury right in front of our eyes in the past 30 days, friends. They've looted the treasury. And this is something that we were talking about in the first week, Joe, when Brock was here, was that there's no excuse. They're on bailout number, what, 3.5 or 4 coming up now? And there's no excuse why they haven't done more for regular, ordinary people.
Oh, yeah.
This is where I actually want to take the rest of the conversation, or at least the next couple of half hour or whatever, because like these protesters that are going out protesting the lockdown orders, I fully understand their anger, but they're angry at the wrong thing. They should be angry at the government for not giving them the necessary support, since they're doing what the government has asked them to do by sheltering in place. You want me to shelter in place? Fine. I'm happy to do that for the greater good. Make it so that I can, because obviously I need funds to survive. All of us do.
Right.
And I think, honestly, I think you could make a very strong case for major civil disobedience when all this, not even necessarily when it's all over, but we might have to do it while it's all happening, because the 1st of May is a week away, less than, right? And I think everybody who's on lockdown and doing the right thing and going to basically go broke, rather than let them force you back to work and go through the whole thing again 3 months from now, just write all your creditors letters saying, I'm not paying during the pandemic. And and if everybody did it, there's no way they could process millions and millions and millions of defaults. They couldn't do it. More to the point, if they tried to enforce it, it would crash the banks. So they can't do it. We have the power. People need to fucking realize we have the power. We have the power, not them. It's always been that way, but we've ceded our power.
Oh, I agree with you, Paul. Especially like you said, you say people just stop paying their rent or whatever. Yeah, they can't evict everybody. They can't even get the courts aren't even open. And now, thankfully, being a small business, I'm actually able to get some relief. Although that was dicey too. You look at these companies that that are billion-dollar companies taking millions of dollars. I'm not looking for millions of dollars. I just want to be able to pay you basically what it was intended for, so I can keep my staff, even though we have almost no work, so I can keep paying my staff so that they don't go bankrupt, so they don't lose their livelihoods, they don't starve to death, and that's all I want.
Okay, well, here's my thing, right? And no disrespect to anybody, but why isn't everybody fucking furious about these bailouts? We're talking about giving money to people with money and starving people who already don't have money. You should be fucking furious. We're so inured to, oh, that's just what they do because, oh, yeah, they're just so corrupt and we just accept it. Fuck that. Fuck it. People should be tearing fucking Washington down right now.
Well, especially Trump's $600 billion slush fund.
Yeah, and that's just the iceberg, Joe. And then you throw into it the whole thing about the post office as well. The post office needs a bailout. The post office is actually in the fucking Constitution. So it's a part of government. You can't let post office fail. It's part of government. But he's making Trump, yeah, I was going to say that. You probably say the same thing. He's making the argument that, okay, we'll save it, but we have to be in control of it.
Trump is saying that he won't give them a dime. He won't help them at all unless they raise their prices.
It's a government service.
Yeah, I know.
Libraries or the fire department or, I can't.
Well, when you're talking about, well, I might be slightly changing the subject back to what we were talking about just a moment ago, but I've even seen people like Matt Christensen complaining that, oh, well, some people, they're getting more money now than when they were working, and we can't have that.
Which is for one.
That was one of the arguments that were made before they passed the bill. The one that gave everybody the $600 on top of their unemployment. The argument that the GOP Republicans are making, especially in southern states, was that some of their citizens would end up getting more than they were getting while they were working. And Bernie Sanders basically said, okay, you want to hold the bill up for that? Fine. We'll go through this whole thing line by line, and I will tear apart everything. So either you sign it or we just sit here forever.
Right.
And they they're not happy. Obviously, they're still complaining. But that's
how politics That's how politics is supposed to be done. You know what I mean? If you're in a position to use your power to force that concession, I'm glad Bernie took that because no one else in fucking Congress did.
Well, that's one of the things I like about him. He doesn't give a shit what other people think.
Yeah,
well, that's the one thing too that this is again about how the people respond that pissed me off, and I took a few of my friends to task. They were posting this thing of like, oh well, there's people getting more on unemployment than what they work. It's like, well, no, that's not true, or then some other people who are still working. I'm like, well, all that means is that those people, and basically like first responders, store clerks, stuff like that. I'm like, well, all that tells me is that those people that you're talking about are vastly underpaid. So that's the solution isn't to tear down the people because I don't know about your state. Well, Rob and I are in the same state, but in New Jersey, the threshold of how much you get for your unemployment is 60% of your base salary, but there's a cap. So the only people that are getting all the money are people who are making a decent, middle class people who are making a decent wage. Everyone that's making less than the maximum, and they're certainly making less than they were making. So my thing is, and the funny part is, I'm like, I've been arguing for a $15 minimum wage for ages. So if people were actually getting a $15 minimum wage, then that wouldn't be an issue, because those people would all be getting more than they are now, and there would be that equity.
So Joe, talk about the 15. To turn left a little bit here for a second about the $15 minimum wage, right? And you get an awful lot of people, like the corporate people, saying, "Oh, if you raise the minimum wage to $15, it's going to raise all of our prices." What do you think? Because I'm not necessarily an economist in terms of my thinking. I don't necessarily know how these things work as well as you might know. But from my point of view, the way to get to $15 an hour is to do the following. Before you do that, you pass a law that says minimum wage must go up by the same rate as inflation every year. You do that first. And then you raise the minimum wage to $15, so that if they want to raise their prices, that will make inflation happen. And then they have to give you a raise again. So right. Every time inflation happens, you get a raise. If you write that into the law, and then you arbitrarily bump the wage up that has nothing to do with the markets, they have to therefore profit less. It's as simple as that. They have to take less of a profit for their shareholders. They don't have a choice.
Right. I agree. And now here's one thing, other important thing too, because that's one of the big arguments that people use to try to go against the minimum wage that creates inflation. I did some digging a few years ago, and I wish I saved the link. It was not on another computer that crashed. But basically, yes, when minimum wage first goes up, you do see a little bit a tick up in inflation. But shortly after, 6 to 9 months later, it actually recedes. So it's only temporary, because what happens is people suddenly have more money, they go spend it, and then the system gets used to it, and it kind of goes back, and the usual competitive forces come back into play. So there's very little, if any, lasting of inflation. But if there is, like you said, your system would compensate. The other thing too, as far as raising prices, in some cases, would it probably? Yeah, but I would argue that that's probably necessary, because basically what we have right now is that we are paying for those people, but in other ways. So I remember seeing like what percentage of people who work for Walmart qualify for either food stamps or Medicaid or some other government handout. So basically, these people are getting paid so badly that the rest of us are subsidizing Walmart's workforce. And all for the illusion that Walmart's cheap, because we're not factoring in. If you took the cost of all the support that has to go to pay the workers properly, or to make up the difference, now Walmart's not so cheap anymore. Maybe they're going to be a little cheap because they're huge and they got economies of scale, but maybe it wouldn't be so easy for them to kill all the mom and pop businesses, because their prices wouldn't be artificially low.
Right.
Walmart could literally double. They could literally double the salary of every single employee that works for them, and they would still make fantastic profits.
Exactly. And then
not paying them more.
Right. Well, another good example is in food service. Now, and Rob's got a lot of experience in food service. So in most places, so like the back when I was in high school, the minimum wage for someone working as a server was $2.13 an hour. Now, New Jersey has their own, it's gone up, but the national one I think is still the same. So when I was a kid, but around the time when people were making, $2.13 an hour plus tips, and at that point, the difference between their minimum wage and the overall minimum wage, they were getting about 60% of the overall minimum wage, and most people would make up for it in their tips, maybe even do a little better. But now, back then, the typical tip was 10%. Now we're talking about 18, 20%. So again, this is an artificial subsidy. So it's because instead of paying the workers a higher base salary, they're basically the people who own the businesses said, well, you just give the workers, don't give them 10%. Now then it's 15%, then it's 18%, then it's 20%. Next year it'll be 25%. So the cost of the food did go up. We're just, they're just having you pay the employees directly. And of course, that means if somebody goes in and doesn't tip, they're totally fucking over the server.
Right.
Yeah.
No, they were like Walmart with the food stamps. It's kind of a double whammy, because not only are you helping the employees that are working. Not only are you subsidizing their pay, they then take those food stamps and they spend them at Walmart. So Walmart is
Right.
getting that money back.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I'm right in remembering that that's another thing we have to thank Bernie Sanders for, because he basically threatened the Walton family and said, "Listen, you know, if you don't, or no, it wasn't Walton's. It was Amazon, wasn't it? It was Amazon. He got the workers 15 pounds because they had the same problem. Their workers were on food stamps and everything. And Bernie said, listen, we're gonna tax you for the money that it costs to pay the food stamps. So
That'd be great.
everybody say hello to Michael.
Hey, good to see you.
I haven't seen him in a long time.
Been a while.
Yeah, how you doing, Michael? All right?
I'm okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I was just talking about because like that's the thing that one of the things that used to bother me when Bernie was still actively campaigning was so many people said, "Oh, what's Bernie Sanders ever done?" And it's just like, dude, just in the past 3 years, he's got the Verizon workers more money, he's got the Amazon workers more money, he's got I can't remember another one. He did like 3 major corporations, got them to cave in and do more money for that, and that's just as a senator. That's not even using his.
There was, I mean, because I heard that argument a lot, and I mean, I didn't really know what to say, so I actually did some digging. As senator, his time as senator, he co-sponsored like a couple thousand bills.
Right.
And the response was, yeah, but they all co-sponsored. That doesn't mean anything. How many did he sponsor himself? There were his bills that became law. And the answer to that is 3. So see, he'd done nothing. But Hillary Clinton also only had 3.
Right.
Elizabeth Warren, I think it was 1. Amy Klobuchar was 14.
Wow.
Now, in terms of senators, she kicks ass.
Yeah.
She gets shit done. I don't like her, and I'm glad she's like nowhere near the race anymore. But she does get shit done.
Rob, she's totally close. She's going to be the nod. She's going to get the nod. You watch.
I don't think so. I think it'll be Elizabeth Warren.
I hope it's Elizabeth Warren.
I think
Like people are
Warren-
saying, oh, it should be Stacey Abrams because that way Biden can lock up the black vote. Biden already has the black vote. That's how he got to where he is.
Well, I understand. I understand
Like-
the point you're making, but
He already has.
and-
He already has the moderates. He already has the moderates. He already has the black vote. You cannot expand your base by going after people you already have.
I agree.
He doesn't have the progressives. He doesn't have the Bernie Bros.
Right.
And the only way to get them and keep his promise to have a woman vice president is Elizabeth Warren. That's the only.
I think so too. I think so too.
If he has any brains, if the people around him have any brains, they're gonna tap Warren.
I think
sure
there's a
hope he doesn't
significant minority. Oh, go ahead, Kazim.
I was just going to say, I sure hope he doesn't go for Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, me too. No, I think Gretchen Whitmer's already said publicly that her state needs her too badly to even consider being the vice president.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but as regards the which way Biden will go, and Bernie Bros and going for Warren and so on. I mean, I think there's a significant minority of Bernie Bros. I wouldn't like to put a number of it. I'm pretty sure it's a minority of them that have a bit of chapped ass about Elizabeth Warren because she didn't. She sort of stabbed Bernie in the back around about that time. She wouldn't shake his hand, and she said that he had told her that a woman couldn't win and all this kind of crap. Which, you know, I don't know what the truth of that conversation was, but I mean, I found it interesting that Bernie wouldn't attack her even in the middle of all that misunderstanding. He wouldn't say one bad thing about her. I mean, Bernie has really comported himself with a lot of class throughout the last election cycle and this election cycle, and for that matter, in between. And I think, again, that also goes down to him bowing out when he bowed out. I mean, he could have probably tried to stay in.
And he wanted to stay in.
Yeah, I think with the pandemic happening, though, he realized his efforts are better served, and the country is better served by him trying to help with what we're going through right now.
I think going into Wisconsin, I think he was uncomfortable going into Wisconsin, and then when he saw what actually happened,
right?
How they basically just screwed all the voters. I think after Wisconsin, he said, "Holy shit, I probably should have stepped out before. I'm not going to make anybody else go through that."
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's been said before that he's too much of a nice guy, and there's some truth to that. I think he don't go for the jugular. He's not the type.
Well, yeah, I think Warren would be a good nod. I mean, again, obviously, there's still going to be some progressives that are still going to, they're just going to hold their breath and stamp their feet. But I think having Warren will attract some, and I think that'll probably be enough.
And you're kind of a Warren fan, aren't you, Michael?
Yes, I was originally.
Yeah.
Ever since the age of Trump, I have been off with my predictions, but I thought that she would be the nominee.
See, that's one thing I do hold against Bernie regarding Warren, because Bernie joined this race after Warren did, and I think he would have been better served to get behind her and help support her rather than jump in the race after she joined.
I think there's an argument for that, but Bernie was campaigning without announcing his campaign from the minute 2016 ended. I mean, he wrote 2 books. He was constantly on the TV because, remember, in the interim between the 2 election cycles, the fucking media loved Bernie. He was on all the time. Oh, come and tell us what your thoughts on this subject is, Bernie. Come and tell us what your thoughts is. They loved it. As soon as he announced he ran for president, Bernie disappeared from the fucking screens.
Well, and that's the thing, though, and he knew, and I'm sure he knew that was going to happen. So that's my thing. Is like, look, put the nation ahead of your own ambitions and say, okay, because I think if he had gotten behind Warren, I think Warren would be the nominee right now. I really do.
I agree with you. I had a fantasy when last year before the actual election proper sort of got started. I had this sort of fantasy that what they should announce is that, hey, we're both going to run for president. And if you want Elizabeth to be the president, vote for her, and Bernie will be the vice president. If you want Bernie to be the president, vote for him, and then Elizabeth will be the vice president. And then at a certain stage, whoever was in the lead would just accede to the other one. And that way you lock up the entire left-hand side of the party, because I think Michael said the same thing in the video. I think if Bernie and Elizabeth had teamed up, especially if they had teamed up right before South Carolina, that would have been the time. That would have been the moment.
Yep.
Because South Carolina was the game changer, wasn't it? I mean, there was, and I know, Joe, you probably disagree with this, but I personally think there was an awful lot of shenanigans leading up to South Carolina and right after it.
Yeah, right before South Carolina, there was a lot of backroom dealing going between Obama and the other candidates.
Yeah.
Obama talked to them all.
Well,
All of them.
yeah, but they didn't drop out until after. Most of them didn't drop out until after South Carolina.
No, they dropped out before.
No, they dropped out after South Carolina, but I think the plan was before, because it was all too synchronous. And I think Michael made the same point in a video at the time. I mean, the order of events took place in just exactly the right way necessary to lift Joe through this funnel he was falling down through the bottom end of, push him back out the top and spread out.
Yeah, but see, here's the one thing about that, though, because I know
Joe was falling off a cliff.
Oh yeah, he was doing horrible. But the thing is that like one of the things is that because I remember some people saying, oh, when this person dropped out and that person dropped out. The thing is that because I heard a lot of progressives say, well, don't go for Pete because he's a fake progressive. He's not really a progressive. Well, if that's the case, his people weren't going to go from him to Bernie. They were going to go to maybe Klobuchar or somebody who more middle of the road or more to the right. So I don't buy it, because I don't think their individual supporters were going to then fall from whoever their candidate were and then go to Bernie. I think the progressive wing was going to be Warren and Bernie. And I think if like I said, I think if Warren had been able to kind of really jump out to a lead, because remember at one point she was kind of doing really well.
There was like 3 or 4 weeks there where she was looking pretty sunny. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really put a lot of stock in as far as that, because I don't think it would have changed. If anything, I could see the more moderate and right wing parts of the Democratic Party of those guys saying, hey, look, Bernie's only winning because Bernie was getting 35%. Bernie's only the leader in these races because he's getting a plurality. He's not getting a majority, he's getting a plurality. So we'll all lose if we're all split up into little chunks, but we collectively. But that's part of politicking, and I don't think that's anything unusual or dirty at all. Because
if it's only dirty if it's a conspiracy, Joe.
I mean, the same thing. I know a lot of progressives were mad at Warren for not dropping out soon. They felt she was diluting the progressive wing that because our voters probably would go to Bernie, which is probably true.
Oh, I am glad I'm not the only one with background noise. I'm glad I'm not the only one with background noise. This kid is screaming like crazy tonight, just hollering for the sake of hollering. I'm like, what's going on? Anyway, what Paul said, it's only dirty if it's a conspiracy. Like if it was an organic dropping off of candidates, that's one thing. And that's politics. That's going to happen. If there's a backroom deal and there's phone calls and people are being told, this isn't your time and wait for this and that, whatever, by a central figure, the most influential Democrat in the country, yeah, that's kind of dirty.
Yeah, it's dirty, all right.
I mean, Obama's aides have already, come out and said, yes, this is what we did. Yes, this was done in order to take Bernie out. They've admitted it. They've openly admitted it. So yes, it was dirty. It was dirty. It wasn't the DNC directly, but Obama is the de facto head of the party.
And it couldn't have been done without a nod and a wink from the DNC anyway.
Right. So
yeah, the thing is, I think more is those guys were not getting any delegates and they were running out of money.
Some,
Most,
but that's a part of the primaries, though. Like if Pete had done well in the very next primary, he would have gotten more money.
Sure.
I honestly thought Pete and Amy Klobuchar were going to at least see themselves through to Super Tuesday, but they did not. Had they seen themselves through to Super Tuesday, it would have split enough of the vote off that Bernie probably could have, overcome what happened in South Carolina the previous week.
But again, two important things. One, they weren't getting delegates. I mean, PP got some delegates the first two primaries, and then he was getting nothing, and Amy was getting nothing. They got literally a handful.
Right.
So they had there's no route for them to win. Even if they stayed to Super Tuesday, it wouldn't make a difference.
Frankly, when you're only polling 6 or 8% the whole way through, you never had a route to win in the first place, and so they should have got out after the first election.
Probably, but
Right.
by that same token is if the argument is it's dirty that someone who only had a plurality didn't win, I can't get behind that because basically
I don't think anyone's making that argument, Joe. I'm certainly not making that argument.
No. Not that he didn't win. The fact that there was an alignment of the party against him, not for the sake of any one particular candidate to win, but for one particular candidate to lose.
Right.
That's what they did. That's dirty.
Yeah. See, I don't agree, and I don't think that's what happened.
But they've admitted it. They've already said that's what they did.
Again, how people interpret what they read. Let's move on to another topic, please.
Okay. So anyway, now with that being said, if any one of them, if they had all stayed in, it would have I don't want to say the Biden side because he wasn't anybody yet. He was just another candidate. If they had continued the way they were going, all of them except for Bernie would have been bleeding. And the idea is let's cut this bleeding. Let's choose somebody. And Biden was the one that was anointed. He's going to be the one. That's what they decided. Probably because he was the most well-liked of the bunch on a personal level. People like Joe. He
was the only one close enough to the top to be anointed if it wasn't going to be Bernie. It's as simple as that. Everyone else was struggling, but no one was getting anywhere near the same sort of close to the kind of plurality that Bernie was starting to pull off in the first 3 elections. And I think so. I think, like you say, there was definitely a calculation made. But Joe doesn't want to talk about this anymore. Look at his face. Aw, let me give you a hug, Joe.
Thank you.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, we can't have that.
So how good do you think Joe Biden's chances are of winning?
Oh, I'm pretty sure he'll win. I'm pretty sure he'll win. If it weren't for the pandemic, I'd say it's dicey. But I think I think COVID is less of a boost for Biden as much as it's daggers for Trump.
Yeah, big time.
Trump is stabbing himself in the forehead in front of everybody.
I mean, they're literally canceling his briefings because they realize every time he goes out and talks that his popularity goes down. Yeah. And if you're a president and your strategy is to run and hide, I mean, that didn't work for what's his name? Third president, his son. Adams. That didn't work for John Quincy Adams, and I don't think it's going to work for Trump.
Right.
I mean, there's a mentality. This country is, and it's been this way probably from day one. When the country is in crisis, we rally around the president. If we're in war, we rally. I mean, this is why W got reelected. We rally around the president. So Trump intentionally used wartime president as a label for himself, and we saw a bump in his approval. He's pretty much pissed that bump away because he's completely inept. But it's rare to see a president lose approval during a crisis. Yeah, he's done. He's done. Like I said, he's stabbing himself in the forehead on TV every day. So
Yeah, Terrence made the point just now that Biden doesn't look so good on the coronavirus either. And I'm not sure in what sense you mean that, Terrence, but I will say this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I might have said this last week as well, friends, but I mean, Biden really ought to be ubiquitous on the TV. He's running for the presidency. And I know that it's hard to compete with Trump's exposure for anybody. I mean, because they love overexposing Trump. It's all media, as far as I'm concerned. It's their fault, not Trump's fault even. It's their fault. But so I think it's hard to compete with Trump in the media. But that being said, I mean, he is former vice president, front runner for the Democratic nomination, and Trump is fucking fumbling every goddamn day. He should be going for that jugular every single day. And I don't see it happening. And when I do rarely see Joe come out of hiding, he doesn't seem as sharp as I wish he did. But that's not even necessarily the point I want to make. He's not. He's just saying like the most obvious, literal fluff, non stuff. You know,
generic.
We need to make sure that the nurses and doctors get the proper PPE. Well, yeah, we all know that. That part's obvious. What are you going to do about it, Joe?
Well,
tell us how to fix it, Joe.
I don't think he's ready.
If you were president, Joe, you know.
Yeah, well, I was just looking here. Just 4 hours ago, he said he wants a new stimulus a hell of a lot bigger than $2 trillion. Now, I mean, obviously, I didn't get a chance to read the details of it, but
I don't think he's ready, like emotionally ready to get into a sparring match with Trump. And I think it might be too early in the whole process for him to do that. It might actually, I don't believe I'm going to say this, it might actually be better that he's not.
Well, the other risk of it too is coming off as trying to use the crisis for political purposes,
Right.
which does turn a lot of people off.
Right. And he doesn't want to look like he's undermining. Well, okay, I should say this. It's possible he doesn't want to look like he's undermining the president while we're in the middle of a crisis. Yes, he should be all over the place. Yeah, he should be saying more. I agree. But he has to be very careful about what he does say, because he's not the most well-spoken person in the world, and he
Sure.
can easily blow up in his own face.
Well, I don't know if it's true, but it seems to me that Joe Biden's team's strategy is to, be measured in what you say. Make sure every time you say stuff, you as much as possible you do pre-recorded things, because that way there's less gaffes, right? So he wants to be measured in what he says. I think part of the strategy is to keep Joe low profile, because what they're wanting to do is to let Trump hang himself with his own bullshit. And I think it's working. I think Trump is hanging himself. I mean, God, that comment about the disinfectant is the worst example of it, but it's definitely also the best example of it. I mean, my God, Where have we come to when the president can tell people with a straight face to inject poison, and then the next day come out and say, I just wanted to see what would happen? That's a psychopath.
Yeah,
Right, because
so
even if he was trolling, how irresponsible is that?
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
He basically just said, I wanted to see if people would die.
Right.
I mean,
And that's a psychopath.
right. There's no other way to interpret that.
Right.
I just wanted to see if people would die. Ladies and gentlemen, there's your president.
This is the same president who talked about hydroxychloroquine and somebody used it and died, didn't learn, and then he's talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, and that's why I get look, people. The Democrats have lots of problems. You know, we all know them. I mean, we may disagree exactly where the lines are, but we definitely agree that the Democrats have their problems of their own. But I get so torqued off at the both sides are the same people. I'm like, maybe at one time, you know, you could make that argument, but now the level, I guess you can say, you know, the Democrats' problems are here, and then Trump and the Republicans' problems are way the hell up here. I mean, this level of graft, corruption, and lack of competence. Because here's the thing, I've always felt that the Republicans were more corrupt than the Democrats, but I never viewed them as incompetent, like tragically and criminally incompetent, and that's where they've come. Because even if you think about it, the Tea Party, what did they do? They primaried out the old school Republicans, the old school conservatives, like real conservatives who actually had principles, even if I disagree with them. And I knew things were going bad when they primaried out Dick Lugar. I mean, I think I mentioned this before. The guy his name is Penis Firearm, and he wasn't conservative enough for for the Tea Party, and they primaried him out. And at least again, Dick Lugar, I disagree with him probably 80% of the time, but he was a man of principle, even if I disagreed with his principles. And he was also an adult, and he was competent. And now competence is actually seen as a detriment. You know, they actually attack competence now, you know, and expertise. That's reckless. I mean, where we've come, it's scary.
Yeah.
There has been an effort in the past, I'm not sure if it's 10 or maybe 20 years, to sort of vaunt ignorance, you know, and to concurrently slag off being smart. You know, if you're a smart kid in school now, that's, you know, it wasn't particularly popular to be smart when I was in school, for that matter. You know, smart kids can take a bit of shit, but I think, you know, having said that, that's when you're a kid. That attitude shouldn't pertain into adulthood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and that's the other thing too with Trump. I mean, Trump's not even at fault for where the Republicans have come. He's a symptom. It took 5 decades for the Republicans to go in the direction where they could even consider someone like him as their leader, and especially considering if you look at in the beginning of the process, you know, even Kellyanne Conway. A lot of people forget this. Kellyanne Conway went off before she was his campaign leader. Went off about how inept he was, how corrupt he was, how, you know, vainglorious and all these terrible things he was. But then she got a job, and all of a sudden that didn't matter.
Okay, I have to do a swerve, right? Kellyanne Conway is a fascinating person to me, and the whole thing with her husband. I mean, I don't know whether that's staged or not, and I want to get into that in a second. But let's talk about Kellyanne Conway for a second, because Kellyanne Conway and Stephen Miller are the only two people who have never been fired from this administration, other than family members. How do they survive? What's their secret?
Ass kissing.
It has to be ass kissing involved, obviously, but I mean, like, even that hasn't been enough for lots of the other ones. You know what I mean?
Even before Trump won the election, there was a story that was put out by the right wing, anti-Hillary. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was really bad, and it was lies. It was just dishonest. And when Kellyanne was asked about it, straight on, her response was, "Oh well, it's already out there.
Right.
It is what it is." And it's just like, so there's no taking anything back. There's no recanting. There's no correcting the record. It's, oh well, the damage is already done. What are you going to do? It's too late now. She's a weasel. She's just
she's an interesting person. I actually hate myself because I kind of fancy Kellyanne Conway. I can't even describe why, but I look and I just go, oh.
Maybe it's a hate fuck thing.
I can't even describe it. I don't even know why I fancy her, but I kind of do. I think she's a bit, yeah, she's just something agreeably nasty about that chick.
See, Stephen Miller doesn't get fired because why would he? I mean, basically, Trump goes to him. Half of what comes out of Trump's mouth came originally out of Stephen Miller's mouth.
He's the president.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So Kazoom, are you familiar with Kellyanne Conway's husband, George Conway, and the things he says on Twitter?
Not very much. No, I have to.
Oh, right. Is anybody else aware? Because George Conway is one of Trump's biggest critics online, and these people are married. And so she's the one saying all of Trump's stuff, repeating these lies. And she's the one who invented the, alternative facts concept and all this kind of crap. I mean, and she just says things that are like immediately disprovable. So she's clearly on Trump's side, or she's at least prepared to say anything for money. It's either one or both of those things. How could she be married to George Conway?
Well, remember James Carville and Mary Matlin? Mary Matlin's very, staunch Reaganite, and James Carville got Bill Clinton elected, so, and they were married for 40 years, 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Opposites attract.
Hate fuck, I guess.
I mean, George Conway is a conservative Republican. I mean, there's just, he's more of an establishment figure, though. And Kellyanne, like, this isn't her first runaround. Before she married George, she was one of the people that was trying to get Bill Clinton out of office.
Right.
She was heavily involved in the massive right wing. What was the term Hillary used?
The massive right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, she was part of that. And Brett Kavanaugh was also.
Right, yeah.
I mean, Trump's the people that surround Trump that aren't the immediate Trump people, not the ones that he brought with him, but the ones that he brought on since. A lot of those people are old anti-Clinton people from the early 90s. I mean, these guys are more old school right-wing nut jobs from way back then. It's like the gang is back together.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Were you going to say something?
No.
You look like you're about to say something. Well, I will real quick then. I mean, like back when George W. Bush was president, you had his little cabal was drawn directly from the Project for a New American Century. Right. Wolfowitz, Cheney, all those people, Rumsfeld, all those people all came from that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure Heritage Foundation is the one where Trump's getting all his right-wing people, isn't it? Is it the Heritage Foundation? Am I right in that one? I think I think that might be it.
Part of it anyway.
Or it might be the Federalists or something like that. I don't know.
And to your question about whether she's a true believer or the opportunist for money, I put it in the latter category because again, if you can go back and you can find things that she said about Trump, a ton of anti-Trump things before she worked for him, and I don't think she changed her mind. Although Rob brings up a good point, perhaps maybe the fact that since it was ultimately, Trump versus Hillary, and she hated Hillary so much, she was willing to say and do and sell out everything to get to basically, get not Hillary. That's the only other thing I can think of.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I just, I'm actually quite surprised at the depths people have shown themselves prepared to stoop to just say whatever they'll say to get a paycheck. Tucker Carlson, Jeanine Pirro, the things that come out of their mouths are shocking. I would not say those things for money. I know I wouldn't. You couldn't pay me to do that shit.
You have principles.
Yeah, and I don't care about money that much. I mean, I like money. Don't get me wrong. Money equals choices, and choices equal freedom. So I don't have no appreciation for money. Having said that, I'm not gonna. I have way too much honor to tell lies for money. I mean, hell, I stab people for money. So how could I even say that, right? I used to stab people for money, right? But
they chose to be stabbed, right?
Yeah, they chose to be stabbed. Exactly. So that's different.
See, that's the thing, Paul, and that's the reason why you're one of my favorite people in the world.
Thank you.
I just checked real quick because I thought so. I wanted to double check. Jeanine Pirro, she ran against Hillary Clinton for Senate for New York and lost.
Wow. I did not know that.
That's another. There's another one. I mean, she was since before the election. She was like right there with Trump and up his ass, and it wasn't necessarily because they agreed on any worldview. It was anti-Hillary.
All right.
You remember, she's also the journalist who basically stalked Hillary out in the woods.
She the one?
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Michael?
I just looked up the actual cabinet members who have been with Trump through this entire administration so far, and there's a pattern. So Steve Mnuchin is the Treasury Secretary. It has been the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Ben Carson's been housing and urban development the whole time.
Yeah.
Elaine Cow is the Secretary of Transportation the whole time. And then Mick Mulvaney.
And Betsy DeVos.
Mick Mulvaney is the Office of Management and Budget. So basically, the money people have all been the same the whole time.
And
All the money appointments.
Elaine Chao is Mitch McConnell's wife.
Yes.
Yep. And how is that not a conflict of interest? How is that ethically okay to have someone who's the leader of the Senate in the White House? How is that? What?
Wilbur Ross is Secretary of Commerce the whole time. Sonny Perdue, Secretary of Agriculture the whole time. You don't hear a lot about these people, but all the people that have to do with money are the ones that have been there the whole time.
What's that former governor of Texas name who was Department of Energy? Is he still there as well?
No, he's gone.
No,
Perry.
Okay, yeah.
Perry left.
Yeah, I guess he got tired of sitting in it. I used to joke that he was probably because he was in charge of the nuclear arsenal, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I think he was like I think he was like overburdened by that. I think he didn't really want that job but couldn't say no,
Well, we didn't know that he was in charge of the nuclear arsenal until after he got the job.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't know.
And that's part of the big problem that I've had with Republicans again for the last 30, 40 years or so, is that they're so anti-government and they're so convinced that the government's not the solution that when they get in charge, they go out of their way to break the government to prove that the government doesn't work. It's like, well, sure, if you intentionally sabotage government, it's just like the ACA. They got out of their way to sabotage. Think about how hard they had to work to make the ACA do as badly as it's doing in certain spots, although it's doing well in certain areas still. It was like, well, if you sandbag the program, it doesn't work. Imagine that. Who would have thought? Right.
Well, that's what they do in this country. The Tories have been underfunding the NHS in this country since they came in 2010. And they underfunded it for 10 years in a row quite deliberately. And I've seen the Tories do this playbook before. When I first came to this country 30 years ago, they were at the end of what they had a lot of nationalized industries before I got here. And they had just finished privatizing most of them. And they were in the process of privatizing British Telecom when I got here. And then right after I got here, they later privatized British Rail. So they privatized everything that had once been publicly owned assets, right? And the NHS is the last thing. The Tories have been trying to privatize the NHS for 34 years, or 30 years that I've been here anyway. And what they've done is they've sold off little bits of it to private contractors, but they can't quite get away with that because the people that they know full well, the NHS is more popular with people than anything else. It's the most popular part. It's the most popular thing the government does. And get this, it's also the largest employer in the country. 25% of all people who have a job working for the NHS in one way or another.
Wow.
Right. So that's one of the reasons they don't want it to be a publicly owned thing, because that gives the unions an awful lot of power. And they've done a lot of work over the past 50 years to emasculate the unions in this country. But more to the point, they've been underfunding it because this is the playbook. They did this with the industries in the 80s when they were privatizing. What they would do is they underfund the industry. It doesn't perform properly. Then they say, we need the private sector to come in and save this. So they sell it for fucking pennies on the pound. Private sector comes in, raises the prices on everything. Everybody makes a profit, and then we all go home and it's better now because there's competition in the market. No, there's no competition in the market. There's competition for who you get your bill from.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's the thing, because I always point out to people, on both sides of the, people who are pro a national healthcare system and people anti. People have fallen into the trap of saying, oh, it's government-run healthcare. Like, no, it's government-financed healthcare. You have the same drug companies in Britain and Germany and in France that you do here. I know because I've done work with some of these companies that are international. My wife has worked for multiple companies in pharmaceutical that are, based in around the world, and so it's not that in a national system that you don't have competition. Of course you do. The difference is, like you said, who's paying the bill. And is someone profiting off of someone paying the bill?
Right. Well, from my point of view, there shouldn't be any, when it comes to healthcare in particular, there shouldn't be any profit anywhere along the chain. You should not make a profit. It should be a complete service. It's as simple as that. It should be a service. And that's the way to keep the price down. If the way they run the tube here in London, for example, they operate slightly above cost. and the money that they take that's above the cost to run the service goes back into maintaining the service. So there is no profit in terms of people aren't lining their pockets with the extra money. They charge just enough to pay for what it costs to run the service, and then to make sure the service can maintain itself. That's it. And that's the way the NHS should run. Well, used to run and doesn't anymore. Like I say, now they've contracted stuff out. Like once upon a time, when they first established the NHS in this country, was right after World War II. This country was fucking smashed after World War II. And yet, despite that, they created a welfare state, which is not limited to the NHS, but the NHS is the biggest surviving part of it. But when it first had the NHS, you had free dental, free optical, and free healthcare, including free retirement homes for old people.
Wow.
All of that was in the NHS. And they've farmed off most of the, not all, but most of the retirement homes don't exist anymore. They farmed all those off to private. Once upon a time, when you worked in an NHS hospital, say kitchen, for example, you worked for the NHS. Now you work for a company that NHS hires to do the kitchen. Same with cleaning, same with all gardening, same, because a hospital is basically a small community. You need electricians, gardeners, but there's the whole thing that runs a hospital. It's not just nurses and doctors,
Right.
And they all used to work for the NHS, but the government sold off all the little bits, and literally the only people who really work for the NHS properly anymore are the doctors and nurses, and everyone else that works in the hospital works for someone else.
I mean, what's messed up about it too is that people here, they have this idea that, well, the whole, again, the competition will bring prices down. But the funny thing is, in a lot of these bids, you don't really have competition because you have to have a company of a certain size to even be able to bid on these contracts, and you have to go through all these qualifications. And so there's no room for small vendors to get involved and actually add some of that. Because like, okay, in my industry, I'm a small company, but why I can make a living is that I can cost less than some of the bigger companies that do the same thing, and I can offer maybe a more fast service, more personal service, a better customer service. So I've got something to offer. But on a bit for big massive projects, there's no way. So it's really the same 2 or 3 massive conglomerates that are quote unquote competing for that. Now the question I had though is, it was back when there wasn't all the privatization, was there actually a national like pharmaceutical branch? Like, did they actually make the pills?
I think that the NHS, because they're buying for the whole country, they have an awful lot of bargaining power when it comes to the prices, and that's why we get our medication here so cheap as compared to any place else. I mean, my medication that I get, I actually get it for free, literally no pence, nothing. Having said that, if I did have to pay for a prescription here, I think it's about £8 for a prescription, and that usually lasts you for a month. And that's for any medication. It doesn't matter what the medication is. It's all the same price. The government, if a pill is more expensive than that, the government has to pay the extra out of them. You don't pay it at the point of service. You pay £8 for a month's worth of medication for whatever your pill is,
Well, the reason why I asked was because you said about not having any profit anywhere in the system. I mean, if as long as you have a private pharmaceutical company, there's going to be some level of profit somewhere. I mean,
I see the point you're making, and yeah, they are making a profit, but they're not making anything close to the kind of profit they make in America. The medication that I get for free here would cost me $3.50 a month in America, and it's that's a pretty big difference.
The other big problem here, what's happening in more recent days, and I know people are getting mad at pharmaceutical, and I guess technically it is, but it's not so much the companies that have been around and been doing business. What's happening is that the venture capitalists. So we all know who Martin Shkreli is, the guy who came in and bought up a company and then jacked up the price. So that company was not charging, a ridiculous rate. They were charging whatever, the market rate was. And then he comes along and says, fuck everybody, I'm going to raise it 75 times. So he knows nothing about pharmaceutical. He's not a pharmaceutical person. He's just some asshole with a lot of money who wants to squeeze everybody. And so that's the difference. And that's what a big problem that's happened over the last 20, 30 years are venture and vulture capitalists that come in and they don't know anything about the industries that they're buying into. They're looking at only as a profit center. And if you look at what happened to Hostess. So 3 times people bought Hostess, borrowed money against the assets, paid themselves lots of money, distressed the assets, and then dumped it for a cheap price because now it's a distressed asset, and then left it with the debt. So they took the money, so basically borrowed money on behalf of the company, gave themselves that money, and then sold the company away and the debt along with it. So they're not job creators. They didn't create any wealth. They actually destroyed wealth.
Well, asset stripping should be illegal, full stop. You shouldn't be allowed to buy a company so you can strip it. You know what I mean? If you're going to buy a company, you should be investing in the company. That should be like a prereq. It should be illegal to buy a company to ruin the company, because the company isn't just a business, it's the people who work there.
Right.
Yeah.
And it happened to one of my customers, customer here in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Rob knows where New Brunswick is. Basically, we had a customer for a number of years. They got bought by a venture capitalist. And so that company decided, well, they bought a few locations, and they bought one in Cleveland, and they got the one in New Brunswick and a couple others around the world. So they said, well, New Jersey's more expensive than Cleveland, and our Cleveland plant is not making money. They're losing money. But the New Jersey plant is making money. So what we'll do is we'll take the products they make here in New Jersey, we'll move them to Cleveland where, lower cost of living and lower wage base, and we'll make more money. But of course, as you said, Paul, what they failed to understand is the assets were not in the equipment or even the formulas. The asset was the people who worked there. I mean, basically, the equipment that they had in New Brunswick was garbage. But the thing is, the people who worked there cared, and they worked hard, and they used their intelligence to figure out, get the most out of it, and they found a way to make it profitable, even though the cost of living and the cost of operating here is more expensive. So they moved the equipment out to Cleveland. And basically, no one in Cleveland, because when they had the opportunity to learn how to run the systems, they didn't bother. It went out there, and then they couldn't make the product for months and months. They couldn't make any product, and actually had to, before they closed the New Jersey plant, they actually had to bring the New Jersey people out to Cleveland and get them to make the product for them. And they did so many things, and then basically, so they closed the New Jersey facility down and fired everybody, and now the Cleveland facility still doesn't make any money. So all it did was destroy jobs and destroy wealth, because now the company is worth less.
Wow. Yeah. This is the whole thing is so, I don't know. It's so convoluted,
Yeah.
Well, another thing that's kind of messed up here in America too. And I'm looking at the whole thing about the people who want to open up rapidly rather than give the system a time to the disease to run its course. It's all about business, and we got so obsessed in this country with business. Again, to your point about greed, it's like, well, what about business? What about business? And like all of Trump's cabinet, it's all about how does this particular thing affect business? I'm like, well, if you're housing and urban development, you shouldn't give a fuck about business. Your job is housing and urban development, and you should be an advocate for that. If you're the Secretary of Health, then people's health should be your number one, and somebody else can let the labor secretary care about business.
Yeah.
I've actually got a better argument for those people who want to reopen right away for business. And it goes like this. You lock down the whole country for another month and a half, and let the entire virus peter out to be stamped out completely, and then reopen, versus reopening today, let 1,000 people die every day, and then see if people want to leave their houses for the next year. Which economy do you think is going to work? Because I'm not an economist. I'm just a counselor who knows how the fear of death can affect people's behavior.
And dead people don't spend money.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got an employee. She's 70. I know for a fact, like if they said, okay, we're going back to work tomorrow, she will refuse to report.
Right.
Because she's vulnerable. I mean, she's especially vulnerable, and I don't blame her.
Well, here's what I think is the sort of state of play. I think the I'm pretty cynical and a little bit suspicious as well, I suppose, because I said a month ago on the very first one that we did of these things that the $1,200 payment that everybody just got was obviously insufficient for the longer term, and more to the point, the goal of that was so that they would be able to force us all back to work. Because if they make it, and this is the thing about these demonstrations, which I think we spoke about a little while ago, but I mean, like, the anger that these people feel is justified because they're not going to be able to survive. You've got a really justified reason to be angry, but you're angry at the wrong people. If you're not protesting this government for telling you to shelter at home but not making it so you can shelter at home, they're the ones you should be focusing your fucking rage at. You shouldn't be focusing your rage at your governor who's trying his best to keep your hospitals open and the PPE coming in, which, by the way, the feds keep raiding and hoarding for themselves and dishing them out as political favors. It's like, it literally is like a mafia racket that we're watching happen right in front of us, and everybody knows it's happening. Where the fuck is Congress, man?
I shared with Dev another perspective on this, in that a lot of the arguments that are being parroted by people who are going down to the Capitol and protesting, they're actually getting fed these arguments from people that are basically lobbyists for insurance companies. These insurance companies would have to pay out if the business is closed because of coronavirus. But if the government orders it all reopened, then these businesses can't claim that there were acts of God that closed their business.
Same thing with unemployment, apparently, in some states. If you're in some case states, you'd still be covered, like probably New Jersey, because New Jersey tends to have better labor laws. But in a lot of states, if your company reopens and you don't want to go in, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's like 25 or more million unemployed people in the past month, and I'm sure a significant portion of those people will be offered a job back when the economy does open back up. But here's the thing, and I can't speak for what things are like on the ground there. I only know what they're like on the ground where I'm at. And let's just say they decided to open up the economy on the 1st of May, just to pick a date, right? People will be very reticent to go back out and actually behave the way they used to behave. And the economy can only work if it was barely working when people were behaving in a normal consumptive way before this crisis. Our consumption levels are going to be down in every regard, especially when it comes to things like entertainment, sports, for example, or
movies,
live music, just in a pub or any sort of small venue. That's going to be a long time coming back, a long time. Any place where people want to congregate close together, they should naturally be nervous. And I noticed that even in America, when it's not the protesters, I saw like on I think it might have been Santa Monica Beach yesterday, there's about 3,000 people on the beach. And I'm like, look, I know you're bored at home, but boredom is not a particular hardship when compared to death from disease or I just can't really get my head around. And the first week we did this, everyone was pretty much behaving, and because they weren't sick of it yet,
right?
And I think it occurs to me that we all have our limit, I'm sure, for how long you're prepared to put yourself under house arrest. But frankly, I thought a month wouldn't be too hard for people. What do you think, Kazum? Haven't heard from you for a minute.
I was actually starting to look at the comments, and I was kind of zoning off, and I'm getting a really awful headache. The room is almost starting to spin. It's so bad.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ooh.
So we wrap it up, guys. It's been like 2.5 hours, but yeah, I suppose we should start wrapping it up pretty soon, especially if you're just getting a headache.
Well, I mean, don't wrap it up on behalf of me. I mean,
why not?
I shouldn't.
No, yeah, I understand. That's fine. What were you gonna say? Sorry, Joe.
I'm gonna say that the other thing too gets me about the people that are saying they're bored. Okay, I get it, but on the other hand, okay, I thought about this yesterday. I was feeling a little bored, and then I'm looking. I've got literally 100 computer games that I've either never played or played very little. I've got, you can't see it, but I'm in my basement right now. I've got stacks and stacks of games that need to be organized. I've got, regular work to do. I got so many things. I want to go through the attic and do the garage. There's so many things I could be doing. I've got all sorts of music, some stuff I haven't listened to in months. and there's TV shows that I haven't watched. So and there's the internet. And I'm like, you know what? This is of all times in history, this is the least justifiable time for anybody, unless you're really poor, to say, to say they're bored. Like, really? Plus the fact that
I agree.
Probably seen the memes that it's pissing me off. The people that are protesting the most, it's like they're all the preppers and the survivalists. So these are the people who told us city folk, we were fucked if anything ever went bad because they were prepared. They could shoot, and they could hunt, and they could live off the land, and they could live out in the middle of nowhere. And a month of not going to get a haircut, and they're freaking the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, it's mind-boggling that they haven't dumped a whole shit ton of money into fixing the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do it, this is the time to do it. You'll have money flowing through the economy. You'll put a whole lot of people to work. You'll end up with a nice brand new infrastructure when it's all said and done. When we
make yourself very electable as well. It's a good policy to get elected.
Because you can't go wrong on infrastructure. I mean, voters are going to love that. And when we all come out of our caves, we get a nice new country with nice new infrastructure. So there's that. And this idea that like most businesses, there's going to be some small businesses that are gone. Unfortunately, anybody who's been in business knows that a lot of businesses teeter, and something like this will put them over the edge.
Where'd he go?
What?
I don't know. My screen winked out there. Did it ever? I don't know what happened there.
Everything's fine on my end.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Yeah. It just froze up where I was. It's good.
Okay.
Some businesses are going to fail, but most are going to make it because people that are working to pay themselves at their business, in a lot of places, they don't have to pay their mortgage or their rent because that's been furloughed or on the end of their loan. So they don't have those expenses. So it's not like if I don't keep working, I'm going to lose everything. They're on a pause. Most businesses, most of the country is on a pause. It's less of a downturn and more of a temporary stop.
Right.
When this is all over, everything opens back up again. Your customers are still there. Your clients are all still there. Your vendors are all still there. The demand for your product is still there. If we keep money flowing through the system, everybody's going to have money to spend when they come out of their caves. Businesses are going to rehire the people that they let go. If not the same ones, are going to hire new ones. So it's not like everything is gone and we got to start over. It's just pause.
Right, and that's
like
true.
I mean, some aren't going to make it. Some aren't going to make it. But that's always the case.
Our landlord, I wanted to get it in writing. So you guys all know Philip. Philip works for me. He's my CFO and a number of other things. So he went to our landlord and said, "Hey, what can you do for us?" And they said, we can furlough the, pay what you can. But I told them I wanted it in writing just to be sure. But they came back and said, "Yeah, pay us what you can. We understand." Because they don't want to lose us if we default. Because if we just say we default, like if I defaulted on my rent, then I would just literally just declare bankruptcy and shut the business. Because I'm not going to be held. Because I just got a new lease for 3 years. I'm not going to be paying all that money for 3 years of rent that I'm not going to be able to do. So I'll just go out of business. So they understand. So they're gonna wait, and same thing with our health insurance and stuff like that. We got all that sorted out, and we did get approved, thankfully, for a PPP loan. We got the approval yesterday. It's gonna hurt, and I mean, I personally am gonna take a hit, but the business will survive, and we'll keep everybody employed. And like I said, it's just so actually what I'm doing, and rather than wasting the time, because to Rob's point about infrastructure, so I'm starting to have my employees, because we just don't have a ton of work. We get some service calls, and we're kind of finishing up some projects, but we're to the point where we can't fit it. We can't do the field work yet, so we're just kind of, for the most part. So I'm having them do training classes, because why the hell not? We usually don't have time when we're busy, so hey, now's a good time to get training classes.
We gotta let Kazoom go. He's falling asleep on camera.
No, it's not falling asleep. My head hurts really bad.
Oh, okay.
I should get going.
All right. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm gonna go lay down, I think.
Get well soon, bro.
Thanks.
So yeah, Rob's point about the infrastructure is right. Like I thought about that. Like no one's driving on the road hardly. So now's a great time to do road projects because we're not holding people up.
And like a lot of the restaurants in my area, probably by Joe, probably everybody, a lot of the restaurants, they took all their wait staff and now they're delivery guys.
Right.
You know, so those people are still working. They're working. They're just doing a different job than they were doing before, but they're still working.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're probably making more money on tips because around here, where I live anyway, there's a big push from the community to make sure you tip these people as best you can. So they're
That's good to
probably
hear.
making even more money than they were before. Walmart is open. New Jersey is the second hardest hit state in the country with COVID. Walmart's open.
Right.
You got nothing to do, go to Walmart. You know, I mean, a lot of stuff is still up and running. The economy didn't shut down. Certain segments of the economy did, but not everything.
Especially the restaurant staff in my state did not experience things that way. I have a lot of clientele for my job that they come to see me, their wait staff, and they got straight up layoffs when they never would have gotten them before because their jobs would have been afraid of their interest rate going up on their unemployment insurance, you know, for the employer pay in. So they're getting straight layoffs just so that they can collect unemployment because the employers have nothing for them. But then the other half of the staff is staying on to do the takeout part of the job.
What city are you in, Mike? I forgot.
Denver.
Yeah, because I mean, and that's yeah. Here, I know DoorDash and Seamless are doing gangbusters. In fact, we've had way more takeout than we normally would. You know, we normally would go out to eat like once a week or every other week. Now it's like three times a week.
I live in a rural community. We don't have a whole lot like the Deal Dash. They don't come up here. Uber Eats or whatever the other thing is, they don't deliver here. So yes, the restaurants they still do it the old fashioned way here.
So the three places where all those wait staff have ended up is King Soopers, Walmart, and Amazon, and they're getting paid better by those companies than they were before.
Yeah.
Well, that's true because supermarkets are going 24 hours even if they're not open the whole time.
Well, just to attract the employees, they were paying a premium of like $18 an hour right now to work through this. So they're making out better just going to those companies for now.
The store that my daughter works at, they're giving her $2 extra an hour during the crisis. Basically, it's a hazard pay, which I think is great. But it also tells me they could have been paying her that before.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's just like, really, you actually can afford to give me more? Really?
Well, the other thing about that too, I mean, whenever someone tells me, because a lot of times, you know, I get in arguments with these right-wing stooges that don't know I'm in business, and they try to, oh, you're a socialist, you're this. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm capitalist. I'm a capitalist with a capital C, you know, because that's what because I own business. But I'm like, okay, I have one person in my company who makes $13 an hour. No one else makes less than $22.50. And even when I don't have any interns right now, but no intern got less than like $15 an hour. So I'm like, if my little tiny company can do that, Amazon can do that, and Walmart can do that, and all these other big fucking companies can do that.
My full-time employees are making $11 an hour, which, yes, for a full-time employee is not enough to live on, especially in New Jersey.
Right.
But for food service, that's damn good money.
Yeah.
For food service, that's pretty good.
Especially if where you live, Rob. There's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of jobs for that.
So, you know, I mean,
when I had my body piercing studio in this country, you have to give you're required to give your staff 4 weeks of holiday for free. You get 4 weeks of paid holiday. So, and I remember years ago, I mentioned this in a conversation. I think it was a Blog TV conversation, and Brock Lawley was in the audience, and he's like, his whole audience. It wasn't just Brock; it was other people saying, "Why should you pay people not to work?" That was the argument, and I couldn't comprehend it. That's how so many people have been brainwashed over there to think that by giving you holiday pay, you're being paid not to work. No, you're being allowed to have a life and a job. That's what's happening. They're not paying you not to work. They're paying you understanding that you've got a life outside of work, and that in order to keep you, they have to let you have that. That's just completely different attitude.
In fact, it even goes even further than that, Paul. Because if you think about it, what is it really? It's deferred compensation. So, so basically, and this is the reason why like contractors who don't get paid time off get paid more, because they're basically saying, okay, you're not going to get that paid week. So what's happening? So I just say I'm just going to pull a number out of my. Just say I got an employee and they're getting $1,500 a week. Well, that means so then the weeks those 2 weeks are off. That's $3,000. Well, otherwise, I would need to pay them more during the weeks they were working. So it's not like it cost me any money. In fact, if anything, it helps me spread the cost out over a longer period of time. Now, on the flip side, that means I have to kind of stagger when people go off, because I don't want to have a week where nobody is around and we make no money. But yeah, it's just like the pensions when all these right wingers are like, trying to steal the government pensions and the corporate pensions, and like that pension. That's your money. That's deferred compensation. And basically, the agreement on the pension is like, okay, I'm going to pay you less than I could, but I'm going to put it into an account for you. And if you stay with me, you get to keep it. You're fully vested, and you get to keep it, and you get it paid out when you can no longer work. So when they take that pension away from you, they're literally stealing money that you were promised.
Yeah, it's actually your money they're stealing. Yeah, because you put it in there in the first place.
That's right.
It's something that like in the U.S. anyway, because you haven't been here for a long time, Paul, 30 years since you left. A lot has changed here when it comes to the workforce and the way that there's no negotiation anymore. You used to be able to walk into. I mean, I've gotten jobs where I just walked in. I just walked in and said, "Hey, I want this job," and I'd end up talking to a manager right there on the spot, or talking to some hiring personnel. And when we would discuss my history, what I knew, what I could bring to the table, and then the other half of that conversation is what they could offer.
Right.
What this is what I bring. What are you willing to give me for it? And a negotiation would ensue. And there were days, I would walk out of that place the same day I walked in with a job.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. Not only can you not do that, you can't even meet with a person. Like, you have to go online. You have to do everything online. They don't get to talk to you. They have no idea anything about you. And when it comes time, they decide if they want to interview you, the interview no longer consists, or if it does, it's very little, no longer consists of what they're willing to do for you. It's, this is what we're paying you. And if you don't want that, then we'll find somebody who will.
It still happens for white collar jobs, but you're right. For the blue collar, yeah, they're screwed.
For the most part, I mean, it's kind of a thing of the past. And giant corporations and the internet combined have killed the negotiation process of working. So like compensation, Joe had mentioned deferred compensation. Nobody gets that. Like, you don't go in anymore saying, I want this or that, or I am worth this or that. No, you're not.
Well, and that's because we let the unions get destroyed. It's because we let the unions get destroyed, so that labor doesn't have the power it used to have. I mean, now I think I remember seeing, and this may not even be accurate anymore because it's probably even lower now. But last I saw statistics on it, 7% of employees were union workers, and yet the right wing acts like unions are destroying the economy. I'm like, they're almost nobody.
Yeah, they don't even control the Democratic Party anymore either. I mean, once upon a time, they were the main funders of the Democratic Party. And since that's no longer been the case, Democrats have had no choice but to sell out to the corporate. This is all part of the same problem that we've been discussing all night long.
Right.
It's a different facet of the same corruption. The union movement got busted in America by two basic forces. One of them was Reagan and his union busting, basically, to shorten that up in a nutshell. But also the leadership of unions was infiltrated by the sort of money hawk class of people. And so they no longer had the workers as their primary motivator. They didn't. it was all about making sure that they could make a deal with the company rather than, is this the best deal I can get for my my workers? It's like, what can we get them to settle for? They became professional union bosses. They didn't necessarily represent the interests of their members anymore. And so this is where we are now. I compare what's going on in America as to what goes on in Sweden, for example. Now, I've never been to Sweden personally, but I do have quite a few friends and acquaintances from Sweden. And Sweden, the gap between their bottom paid people and their top paid people is like 35 times less than it is in America, right? And Sweden has never had a minimum wage, okay? And yet everybody makes a living wage because Sweden never had a Thatcher, they never had a Reagan, they never had a union buster. So the unions are really, really strong. And Sweden has a culture as well. They have a very sort of mature, responsible attitude towards, well, of course we all want to prosper. That just makes sense. I want my neighbors to prosper because that way they won't want to kill me. Right? And I mean, I'm not kidding. That's their attitude. Well, my best friend in California went to Sweden some years ago now, and he came back and told me a story about, he was at one of the public parks, and he was remarking to his Swedish friend. He's like, "Oh wow, your parks are really nice here." It's like, if this was in town, you'd probably see some like litter around, or floating around, or some graffiti on the walls, or this kind of thing. And so the Swedish guy goes, "Well, why do you think that is? Why don't you take care of your parks better in California?" And he's like, "Well, people don't really belong to any particular person. So people think, well, because it's not mine, I don't care. And so they'll throw that can on the ground, or they'll spray paint that wall of the bathroom or whatever." Right. Whereas in Sweden, he goes, "Oh, that's really interesting because we think it is ours. We think it is ours. And that's why we keep it clean."
Right.
It's a completely different culture.
Here, quick question for you, Paul. In the UK, so obviously, you start off with like the 4 weeks vacation. Now, is that in addition to like public holidays?
Yes.
Do you remember roughly how many public holidays you guys get?
Yeah, sure. You get there's 2 bank holidays in May. There's one in September. There's one I think there's 5 Monday holidays for sure. And then there's holidays there are some holidays that aren't days off, but like so there's the bank holidays, which are Monday holidays, and then obviously Christmas and Boxing Day. You get that every year for sure. And most people, it's not official, but most people do get New Year's Day off. Most people do. It's not an official holiday, but most people get it off because they know you're going to be out in the piss. Never underestimate the drinking culture of the British.
And now what about paid sick time? How much would you get?
I think you're required to give your employees 7 days of paid sick. And if they need more than that, they have to, I think the government has to pay them after that.
Okay.
For sick time.
Yeah. I was just curious. Cause like I've got, again, as a small company, so you start, when you're brand new, I start you with 2 weeks, 10 days, 11 paid holidays, 4 of which are floating, so that you can just decide, because like not everybody's a Christian and not everybody is religious. So, if you want to take May Day, if you want May Day to be your paid holiday, be my guest. I don't get, it's not my place to decide what's important to you. And then it was funny. I don't know if I mentioned this last time. If I did, you just cut me off. But about sick time, because one of my business associates, he was kvetching about having to do 5 because that's the law now starting this year starting in New Jersey, or maybe it started last year. I forget. Maybe it was last year. And he was kvetching about having to pay 5 sick days. Oh my God, how are we going to do this? And so he asked me how I was going to handle it, and I'm like, well, I already give him 6, so the knocks next to me.
Well, yeah. Years ago, when I was having that conversation with Brock on Blog TV, I mean, from my point of view, it's just the cost of business. It's a cost of doing business. You think of it like every other cost of doing business. This is what it costs me to do my business. This is what this employee costs me. Because it's not just, and I don't know how it works in America, but it's not just in this country. It's not just the wage that you pay your employee, because your employee has to pay some of their money comes out in taxes, and some of their money comes out for the National Health Service as well. right? But as the employer, you also have to put money into the National Health Service on behalf of all your employees.
Right.
So that goes in on their behalf. It's not you putting it in, it's them putting it in, but you're putting it in on their behalf, as well as the stuff you extract from their wage for it. So there are more costs of business than just the hourly wage you're paying your staff member, you know?
Well, even here, I mean, I pay 60% of the healthcare costs. So, yes, which is the same thing, basically. The employee pays a portion and I pay a portion.
Right.
Same idea.
So in the last two big businesses that I worked for, there were no sick days.
Shocking.
We had paid time off, PTO days, and if you're sick, you're eating your own vacation days. It's the same pool, and it doesn't matter if you're sick or you're taking vacation, you're losing those days.
Which wouldn't be terrible if they had a big pool. Like I could basically do the same thing. I could lump the 6 sick days and the 10 vacation days and the 11 holidays and lump them all together and say, and you would be no worse off. But my guess is they probably don't have, the pool is fairly small, I'm betting.
Was nowhere near as many vacation days as you guys are saying.
In the Netherlands, they get 7 weeks of paid holiday.
Wow.
Yeah. Was it here? Someone said in Ireland they get 20 days. Yeah, that's what we get here in the UK. 20 days, which is 4 weeks basically. So you work 5 days a week. So yeah, and when I remember when years ago, 30 years ago, I was in the Grand Canyon. I met these guys from the Netherlands, and at that time they only had 6 weeks of holiday. And me and my friend Kenny, and we couldn't comprehend it. What you mean? You get 6 weeks? That's a week every other month. How does that work? How does that work? You know, but that is how it works. But you know, most people take it in 2 week or 3 week chunks at a time. So you do it that sort of way. But this is the thing that Americans really need to explore, because there's a whole continent full of civilized countries over here that do things differently. And not everything they do over here is better than America, but some things are definitely worth at least exploring and saying, hey, you know what? I like that. I would like to put an American twist on this thing you do in Sweden. Not exactly the same thing that you do in Sweden, but we're going to take it and put our American twist on it. Right. You know what I mean? And I think you could sell that in America as well.
Absolutely. Well, especially like I said, the sick time. I mean, like if somebody's, and even forget right now with COVID, where obviously it's more extreme, but just under normal circumstances, we've had times when someone, you know, even though they have sick time, came into the office sick, and then ended up everybody in the office gets sick. Well, then now that's not productive. So it's better. I'd rather have someone, you know, stay home, take a sick day, or even work from home if they're well enough to be able to work, but just not that you want to stay away from everybody else. That's much better than having people come in and now everybody's sick and we lose way more productivity. It's stupid.
See, that's the problem with not having a separate sick days bank from the vacation days, is because people will bank on having a set amount of vacation days to take their big family vacation, and they can't afford to be sick leading up to it. And so they come into work sick all the time.
Right.
And then they get me sick.
Yeah. Well, and then that goes again about, you know, I will keep hammering how this current crisis is such a refutation of libertarian mindset. You know, like if you remember a few years ago, I think it was somewhere in Kentucky where they instead of automatically taking taxes out to pay for the fire department, they made it a voluntary thing. You basically got a bill to pay. And so if there was a fire at your house and you didn't have coverage, the fire department wasn't going to come to your house. So there's this family, they decided to scoff it and they didn't pay. Their house caught on fire and they're calling, they're pleading, and like, and then it wasn't even a lot. It was like maybe like $40 a year, whatever it was. So they were like, we'll give you $1,000. We'll write you a check. And they're like, nope, you didn't pay. So fuck you, basically. And so what ended up happening is, of course, the people's house burned to the ground. But then on top of it, the house next door caught on fire, because fire doesn't care what the fucking law is. And and so now now they did pay, so the fire department came, but the whole thing is like, well, but that person that you paid, well, if you had a smarter system, your house never would have gone on fire because your neighbor's house fire would have been put out before it threatened your house. But people, libertarians don't think that way because they think they're an island. They think they live in their little vacuum. They're the only ones in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got a certain amount of libertarianism to my political point of view, but it is not based on what you're describing as a more strict form of, or even more sort of rightward authoritarian bent. Because one time years ago on YouTube, I think it was when we were having the argument in 2010 about whether we should have a single payer system or what we ended up getting, which is Obamacare. And I was having an argument with someone on the internet, and I'm basically trying to make the argument for a single payer system. And now I've lost my train of thought. What were you saying? I've lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Oh, about how, if you don't help your neighbor, you can still be hurt by the fact that you weren't willing to help your neighbor.
Yeah.
No, I've lost my train of thought. God damn it! I did that last week as well. I think it's like we're coming up on 3 hours of a show here, guys, and I think I should probably call it a night. So has anybody got anything they want to say to the audience members before we wrap up?
Hi and bye.
Hi, and thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for showing up, man.
No problem, man.
It's good to have you here. And Joe and Rob, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to keep doing this every Saturday night, and hopefully next week we can get some girls on the show. Okay. JJ was looking like she might show up today, but she's in the middle of finals, so she's a bit sort of hard pressed. I don't know if you're aware, but she's like a very serious, like hardcore study person. I got a lot of respect for how hard she works at it. And she's like ridiculously smart. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, hey, big love to y'all, and like I say, I'll see if I can get some. I'll see if we can mix it up a bit more with some others as well next weekend. But if you're not in the mood or you're not available, that's fine too. All right. All right. Peace and joy, y'all. I'm ending the broadcast as of now. Yeah.